First at 5, after all of the damage from Hurricane Sally, residents may have to brace once again for another storm as a disturbance works its way through the Gulf of Mexico. If it becomes a storm, it would be Wilfred, and that is the last name on this year's list. After that, we would have to use the Greek alphabet for only the second time in history. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Felicia Rodriguez.
And I'm Tiffany Kenny. Severe weather expert Mike Lyons is tracking that storm along with Hurricane Teddy, which is also gaining strength. Mike?
Teddy is a big boy this afternoon. Winds now up to 140 miles per hour. It's a Cat 4. The Hurricane Center says winds could get up to 150. More about Teddy and its future impact on the Northeast in just a second. But here we go with what will likely be Tropical Storm Wilfred this weekend. At the moment, just a disturbance. Hurricane hunters are still out there investigating the system. So far, not a closed circulation, but that seems like inevitable. We will see what. A tropical depression is likely this weekend, maybe a tropical storm, and the forecast is not a good one. It continues to call for a potential threat perhaps to Texas or Louisiana over the next 4 or 5 days as a tropical storm. Outside chance this becomes another hurricane. You can see it's moving west-northwest right now at 10. Here's Teddy, the second strongest hurricane so far this year. Winds right now 140. It's forecast to come very close to Bermuda the first part of next week, and then maybe a potential threat to New England and the Canadian Maritimes. Elsewhere, happy to report the rest of the tropics, there's not much doing. Here's Teddy, that big storm out in the open waters. There's that other system we're watching in the Gulf of Mexico. This little wave off the coast of Africa seems unlikely to develop, and this one we really don't have to worry about. So at the moment, the tropics are slowing down with two big exceptions, Teddy and of course what will be Wilfred in the Gulf of Mexico. Meanwhile, back here at home, headed for rain this weekend, then a pleasant September surprise, an early season cool front. What that means for us when I'm back with my forecast in a couple minutes.
Mike, thank you. Today, Governor Ron DeSantis visited Pensacola, where there is major flooding damage. Part of the 3-mile bridge is missing, and thousands remain without power tonight. The governor says while the storm may be gone, the impact isn't going away anytime soon.
Even as it moves through states north of us, just remember that widespread river flooding is ongoing, and it could continue over the next weeks in different parts of Florida.
One assisted living facility was evacuated due to power loss, but no serious injuries or deaths were reported.
Unfortunately, we are not done with Sally just yet, as we are still expecting to see the potential for life-threatening flash flooding across parts of the southeast as we go into the end of the week. We'll have the latest for you here on Weather Nation, both on air and online at weathernationtv.com. For Weather Nation, I'm meteorologist Meredith Garfalo.
And now we look back to the west a little bit. On the eastern, this is the last visible image before sunsets. On the right side of the screen, you can see the state of Florida up there, and the lights indicating, well, the lights indicating where we have light again. And I can see there is some in Mobile. Typically, we would look at this and, sort of think about what's going to be happening here with lighting. But there is some light beginning to show up from time to time. Now, you go down to the bottom, you can see the texture. This satellite imagery, we always love this. Caroline's favorite thing, the whole segment. She loves these satellite images right before the sun sets. Because of this, you get great definition ongoing, and you can sort of tell your own story as to what is happening with weather by looking at these satellite images. The colder cloud top showing up down here with the storm. This is the new tropical depression into the Bay of Campeche there, just to the north of Bay of Campeche. And once again, what's going to happen here? Well, the track, and I don't hold us to this track just yet, but as we move along to the north, there's a reason momentum, I think, sort of takes us to the north, and by Saturday, Sunday, we end up with a tropical storm. It would be the last one on the list, the W. Well, then you get to a point there to where we lose the upper level wind coming in from the south that's shoving us northward up toward a New Orleans or somewhere there. We lose it for a long enough time to turn it, and another force will come in out of the east that should push this a little bit further. Out of the east would push it further to the west, and as a result there is a slow, we learned this just now, in order to go to the right, it's not being like being in a car where you make that turn at the same speed. Storms like this slow down before making that much of an abrupt turn, so they slow, and then the influence of the other region, upper level, to push them in a different direction takes place. So there's a massive amount of slowing right there, but there's also reason to believe that we go ahead and strengthen to near hurricane by this point, and then coming back, if not going around, moving back into the South Texas or northern Mexico area near Matamoros or Brownsville, or right into that region, Brownsville, all the way up toward Victoria and through the rest of the area there too. So we're watching out for all of this right now. Winds at 35, 105 is our barometric pressure, and the movement is sort of hard to establish at this moment, but we think we have a meander going on northeast at about 5 miles per hour. The rest of it is all about what happens in the future, and we'll start getting more and more information about whether or not we're going to have flights going in over the next hour or two. We'll find out the schedule for recon and NOAA as we go through the next couple of days. It'll be critical because I think that underlier there is all the drop zone data will go into the modeling during the day tomorrow. That should help us out. WeatherNationTV.com. Check us out. Pluto TV as well. We'll be back in a moment.
The tropics, while parts of the panhandle are still dealing with the devastation from Hurricane Sally.
A new system is getting attention. WPTV First Alert Chief Meteorologist Steve Weigel tracking it all. Steve.
Yeah, and this has a very good chance of becoming our last name storm of the season before we get into the Greek alphabet. Clearly visible on the satellite loop tonight. This is Teddy, Category 4 hurricane that is headed toward Bermuda. A little farther to the west, we have the remnants of Sally moving off the coastline of the Carolinas. That heavy rain getting pulled off Hatteras now. Pretty quiet across South Florida. And tonight, we have a new system out there. Not a storm yet, but more than likely will develop into Tropical Storm Wilfred the next 12 to 24 hours. It's TD22 at this point, winds at 35. The hurricane hunters flew through it earlier tonight and found a closed low-level circulation. It is now forecast to become a Category 1 hurricane. The good news for South Florida, it is expected to make a turn toward the left, to the west, and then a weaken as it pushes in. That's pretty close to Brownsville, Texas, and the northeastern corner of Mexico. That'll be out 5 days from now, so that's next Tuesday with winds at 65. But Teddy is a whole different story. This strongest storm of the season and headed toward Bermuda could make a landfall there, make a close approach next Monday. That's exactly a week after Paulette worked through. And then it tracks almost due north in toward Nova Scotia. That is 5 days from now with winds at 75 miles an hour, Category 1 hurricane. All right, quiet across South Florida tonight. We had some earlier storms. Temperatures high 70s to the mid 80s, so it's still very warm and humid. Tomorrow morning, get out early rather than later. There will be some afternoon showers and storms. More on that, and a cool front about a month early. Looks like it's going to make it into South Florida. We'll talk about that coming up.
Steve, thanks. We have some new video tonight of 3 Mile Bridge in Pensacola. You can see in this drone shot a crane collapsed on the bridge as Hurricane Sally tore through the northern Gulf Coast on Wednesday. Right now, that bridge is closed indefinitely. In the Pensacola area, Sally flooded streets, damaged buildings, and ripped down trees. Power is out almost everywhere. Water service is cut off. But family, friends, and neighbors, they're working together to remove debris from homes and businesses.
And we've been doing this a long time. We have a lot of great customers and students that we've taught, and they're all reaching out right now, seeing can they do anything. So we're just one day at a time.
Governor Ron DeSantis was in Pensacola earlier today to survey the storm damage. He said thousands of rescue and power crews are working hard to help people there recover.
Welcome back to AMHQ. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodell live in Orange Beach, Alabama. The sun is up. We need that because that is most people's source of light here because of Hurricane Sally coming on through. And take a look at some of the damage we're noticing. We're seeing more and more of this as the sun is shining. You see this probably a condo or home here. Probably used to be a gorgeous bay window. It's up high enough we can actually see across the dunes here into the Gulf of Mexico. But now it's perhaps a little open air there. You can even see the bed there, the roof, some damage there to a metal roof, which typically fares up better than the shingled roofs. And even off to the left here, this building, this condo or home there also has a huge hole in it. So I'm not quite sure what hit that area to cause that, perhaps some type of projectile as well. And then off kind of past Between these homes, you can actually see, I believe that's part of Cotton Bayou there, and some of the boats which have been pushed up and out of their mooring, and many are still on land. And we've heard stories of some of these boats being pushed 1.5 miles to 2 miles from where they were originally moored. And gas is also in short supply, as well as the power. This gas station here, major structural damage to the convenience store. They're closed for weeks. There are some owners, some workers there. They're making sure that they can salvage what they can and keeping looters at bay. Although we've seen plenty of police out here trying to keep people who don't belong here out of here. There are checkpoints. There are curfews between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, a beautiful place to visit, but they want visitors to stay out for another 9 or 10 days or so because they just don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the power. Many don't have water as well. And those are some of the things that we take for granted. Steph, you know, you were here, that just flipping on a light switch or turning on the faucet just to brush your teeth for thousands of people here is just not happening yet. But slowly but surely, give them some time, we can get it back. We see, again, the sun's up now, so the power crews will be out doing their best to get people back into the 21st century. Steph?
Yeah, you know, Paul, when you said that you guys got water back, I literally was like, oh, good. I'm glad they got water, because just flushing the toilet, trying to wash yourself all with bottled water, I mean, it is a really tough way to live. So I'm glad that you guys did, and mainly the residents that will be there for quite some time. Let's talk about who needs to be paying close attention. And one thing that we heard in Sally was they thought, oh, it's going to go to our west. Oh, it doesn't look that strong. Let this be a lesson for everyone for the rest of the hurricane season and the next hurricane seasons, and especially with this one, because this tropical depression could take, it's going to take its time and could go along the entire Gulf Coast. So everyone has to be prepared. You always should prepare for the worst, because a little slip one way or another makes a huge difference. Now, right now, it's just a big blob of clouds. There are a few rain showers that are going to come ashore, but it's going to get stronger. And right now it's getting sheared with a little trough off to the west. That's bringing the moisture all the way up into the Gulf Coast. But look at the cone of this thing. First of all, look how long it takes. It's just like Sally, just taking its sweet time. And then the question, does it come ashore into Texas and then go up the coast? Or does it stay just offshore and go into Louisiana? There's still a lot of questions. But look at the models of this thing, because we have all weekend. And then watch as it goes inland here in this particular model. This is a Euro, right? It goes inland into Texas. You see how it loops around. And then it's going to scoot back across the entire coast of Texas and then bring that flood potential into Louisiana. And then, Jen, don't forget just that onshore flow ahead of it. So this could be a big rainmaker for a lot of people.
And we'll be dealing with it for a long time, too, because it's so slow moving. This is a 5-day plus time frame. And, Steph, we're not the only ones dealing with named storms. Something called a metacane named Ianos is slamming the Greek Isles. So this Mediterranean hurricane, I'll put that in quotes, it's not a real tropical cyclone, but it looks like one on satellite. It's going to feel like one. The winds are going to be very strong. We're already seeing it start to ramp up, and strong winds starting to ramp up across the western part of Greece, and we will continue to watch for these winds ramping up through the day today. It'll be hurricane force. I mean, winds, the rain, all of it coming in here. It's called a metacane because it is in the Mediterranean Sea, by the way, and it acts like a hurricane. Speaking of hurricanes, we have one, and that is Teddy. So we get into Teddy with a Cat 4 right now. Teddy has been strengthened. It went through rapid intensification yesterday, jumped from a Cat 2 up to a Cat 4. It's moving up to the northwest at 12 right now, and it's actually pretty far out here in the central Atlantic. So it's closer to the islands than it is to Bermuda, but Bermuda is what we have our eyes on as we see it track up to the north, coming very close. Could it have impacts? Yes, it could. So we're going to keep watch on that. Then where does Teddy go beyond that? We've got a big trough digging in across the east. This is what's going to bring you all this great cool weather into the northeast, even into the south here. So to connect everything together, the reason that you're going to have all that cool weather is going to help pull up Teddy to the north. Does it pull it right into Nova Scotia? That is a possibility for sure. Does it tip it back or kind of pivot it back into the Gulf of Maine. It's not impossible. It's not the most likely scenario, but it's not impossible. You can see there are some low probabilities that we do have that chance of it happening. The most likely thing that will happen with Teddy is that it tracks up here north towards Nova Scotia, Kelly. But I love this map because it really shows you the uncertainty involved. And it's not a zero chance, but it's not a high risk either that we would see something here. It's just, look, pay attention to the forecast, right, Kelly?
Definitely bears watching, right? Yeah. Teddy bears watching.
Comfortable temperature-wise and slightly below the average as we move on into Tuesday. Meanwhile, in the tropics, we have Tropical Depression 22 in the Gulf. It could possibly become Alpha later today. We're moving on to the Greek alphabet, 35-mile-per-hour winds. It's going to meander here, strengthening maybe to a hurricane, but the Gulf Coast states certainly need to monitor its every move. Teddy, a major storm, a powerful one, setting its eyes on Bermuda. Advisories will likely be issued for them later today. Sustained winds at 130 miles per hour. And then we have the earliest 21st named storm of the season developing by the name of Wilfred. 40-mile-per-hour winds. It is moving north-northwest at 17, but this one's going to encounter some dry air and shear down the road, so weakening is expected as we move on into early next week. And if that wasn't all, we're monitoring 3 additional areas for development, and one, the remnants of Paulette.
Well, breaking news, we are now into the Greek alphabet in terms of naming systems in the Atlantic, and that is Alpha. Now, the question is, where is Alpha on this page, which already has tons of stuff on it? It's not the system in the Gulf of Mexico that some of us thought, many of us, me included, thought would be our next named storm. No, it's this one right here, just off the coast of Portugal, about 15 to 20 miles or so, and will likely make landfall in Portugal in a few hours or less. And so this is a subtropical storm, not so much that it is less than a tropical storm. It is just one that has characteristics that include, let's say, the jet stream and also thunderstorms. So it's kind of this weird hybrid between the two. But there it is. It's all the way over here. And our next named storm would then not, of course, be Alpha. It would be Beta, and that would be probably what's coming in the Gulf of Mexico. So this system, which is still Tropical Depression 22, and maybe still just a tropical depression because the hurricane hunters earlier today had to turn around because I believe it was a lightning strike, and they had to turn around for safety reasons, but they will be back in there. They're okay, and they're going to be back in there helping us out understanding what's really going on with now TD22, which is probably going to soon, later today or tonight, become Tropical Storm Beta, the second name in the Greek alphabet, in the Gulf of Mexico. What concerns me with this, I think Colleen raised a really good point, is that we are over some very warm water. And right now the system is reasonably sheared. I think the center of circulation is probably here somewhere on the southwestern edge of the thunderstorms. So right now it's probably not in a mode where it's going to strengthen quickly. But it probably will strengthen, but maybe not all that quickly. And we're already starting to see some of the peripheral impacts along the Texas Gulf Coast and Louisiana Gulf Coast. But because this will be lingering likely over the western Gulf of Mexico, which has not only warm water, but a lot of ocean heat content as well, the depth of the warm water is substantial. It remains over water likely through the weekend and early next week and could become stronger than the guidance suggests, which is, of course, the Hurricane Center's official forecast is for it to become a hurricane just off the Texas Gulf Coast early next week. We have to watch out for the possibility of it getting even stronger than some of the forecasts suggest. We've seen that too many times this year already. Well, heavy rain, nothing else is going to be a big factor for us going forward. Stay tuned.
Right now. And welcome in, everyone, a Friday edition of Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis with Jackie Jarris, Dr. Rick Knapp with us tonight as well. And a lot going on, Jackie, tonight. I mean, the storms just keep coming fast and furious.
I know. Everybody thought TD22 was going to end up being Wilfred, right? And then all of a sudden, Wilfred forms, then we get Alpha, and now finally we have Beta.
We are tracking a very immediate threat to the U.S. We've got Tropical Storm Beta just now named with the newest advisory forecast to be a hurricane. Could be making landfall in the western Gulf Coast states. Let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knapp, to detail more on this. Dr. Knapp, obviously a squirrely track here. What can you tell our viewers?
Well, this is going to be another category slow storm, and eventually somebody, and maybe a lot of somebodies, could get some significant water and wind impacts from this. But it's going to take some time for this to affect land. but don't tune out over the weekend because things could change, including the fact that there could be tropical storm or hurricane watches, storm surge watches going up later tonight or tomorrow morning. They're not quite up yet, but it's close. 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, here's what's really interesting. This morning, there was going to be an Air Force hurricane hunter going into the depression, but that plane got affected by lightning, couldn't go into the storm. Now, it's possible that it was actually a tropical storm earlier today when that aircraft couldn't go in. And then right after that time, subtropical storm Alpha got named after Tropical Storm Wilfred got named, all in the East Atlantic. So if that aircraft had gone in this morning, there might have been enough data to make this Tropical Storm Wilfred before those other storms got named. But that's not going to happen now. Now it gets the name Beta. So we've had 3 systems get a name in the last 6 hours. Amazing year. North-northeast at 9 miles an hour is the motion, but it's not going to stay that way. And it's not going to dedicate itself to moving in any particular direction anytime soon. This part of the track moving westward over the weekend into early next week is probably in general the biggest part that we have confidence in, but don't count on this storm following this line down the middle. We're only putting that line there just to kind of show you how close the forecast points are together and to give you a good idea on the timing. It is still forecast to become a hurricane, but it might or might not make it to the coast as a hurricane. Buoy 2 got sustained winds near tropical storm force. That was another reason why they upgraded it to a tropical storm. Not just that, but based on the satellite estimates. A little bit of rain coming into deep South Texas, but the other factor here is it is suffering from a bit of wind shear, and it will be battling some wind shear most of its life. So that should keep the intensity reasonable, but might not prevent it from becoming a hurricane. And some dry air behind this front might also hinder the intensification down the road. Upper level trough in here is what's shearing it and bringing it a little bit to the north and northeast over the next day or so. But then we're going to have a ridge build. There's that trough now. But then we're going to have a ridge, a weak one, build over the southern plains. And that is what is going to edge it toward the west. Not reliably, not very quickly. And then look at the European model. It doesn't really ever go way inland. And then in this model's eye, it eventually rakes much of the Texas coast and even gets into Louisiana. So don't think you're off the hook in Louisiana. You could eventually get this system. Just because you're not in the cone now doesn't mean that won't change. Okay, let's take a look at some of the models. This gives you a little better idea. You know, following that line down the middle of the cone makes it look like there's going to be a smooth track. All of these models, look at how inconsistent the motion is. Expect the cone to change a lot. Expect the intensity forecast to change a lot. When the steering currents are weak, just like with Sally, the models and the humans, we're going to have a lot of trouble, getting a good handle on where it's going. Now, winds of tropical storm force expected to start arriving as early as Sunday night. So that might be later tonight. They have to put up a tropical storm, a hurricane, and storm surge watches. Next 5 days, greatest chances of tropical storm conditions are the central and southern portions of the Texas coast, but you can't rule out Houston, can't rule out Lake Charles, eventually down the road. Coastal flood watches are in effect. No storm surge watches yet, but that's probably coming. And then, Mike, the biggest concern I have, again, is water. Now, these totals could end up going higher for some portions of the Texas coast, but the models are already suggesting a foot or more. So we saw in Sally what a slow-moving rainmaker can do. Texas, we could be dealing with something like that this time around as well.
Yeah, in some places exceeded the forecast when you're talking about Sally there by a lot too. So just be prepared. Ultimately, you got to be prepared. Water intrusion could be a very big deal for us. Dr. Knapp, thank you.
Well, we now have Tropical Storm Wilfred and Subtropical Storm Alpha. We've officially entered the Greek alphabet for named storms this hurricane season.
First Alert Chief Meteorologist Steve Weigel tracking the tropics. And Steve, we understand this is the earliest we've reached the letter W in a hurricane season.
Yes, the last time was back in 05 with Hurricane Wilma. That was a late October storm around Halloween, just before Halloween. We have several storms out there. We not only have Alpha, we have Beta now. Beta is moving through the Gulf of Mexico, getting better organized, expected to become a hurricane in the next 24 to 48 hours and have an impact along coastal Texas through early next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, weakening as it slides along the coast through Galveston. And a little farther to the east, here's another look at what is Major Hurricane Teddy. Teddy is headed toward Bermuda, but they should miss a direct impact. It looks like it'll move just to the east and then track toward Nova Scotia after that, losing some of its strength as it gets over the cooler waters and a lot of wind shear in this area in the North Atlantic. And a little farther to the east again, there's Wilfred, which is in the central Atlantic, expected to dissipate in the next 4 to 5 days as it moves closer to the Caribbean. And we're not done yet. Look at Alpha. Alpha, well, we'll have probably one more advisory on Alpha. It is over Portugal now, inland. It is a subtropical storm moving inland, and a couple other areas of potential development, 40% chance with that and a 20% chance with that one to the south off Africa. We're going to talk about the weekend weather, the final weekend of summer coming up.
We want to turn our attention now, Caroline, to a lot of other tropical activity. Believe it or not, this was a tornado spawned by subtropical storm Alpha in Portugal.
Wow, that is a large tornado there. And subtropical storm Alpha, one of the newer names, one of the names that was named today, you can see it made landfall in Portugal. Now it's going to be approaching Spain pretty soon. In fact, the forecast track has it moving across Spain and potentially impacting portions of France. Now, if you're a little bit confused on the naming, let me break it down for you. We've already exhausted every single name on our Atlantic list. Wilfred was named this morning, so now we switch gears. Now we're using the Greek alphabet. Alpha was the one in Portugal. Beta is our newest system in the Gulf. The last time we used these lists was in 2005. And Beta didn't form until October 27th. So we are well ahead of where they were in 2005. Now, we mentioned Wilfred forming earlier today as well. You can see it churning there just off that West African coast, expected to be moving its way to the west, maintaining tropical storm force winds until about Monday when it becomes a tropical depression. We also have Major Hurricane Teddy churning in the Atlantic, and this is a classic major hurricane. You can see the symmetry. You can see that well-defined eye wall as well. That is expected to make its way towards Bermuda, making its closest approach Sunday into Monday, something we'll be watching. Models are fairly consistent. Now, what does this mean for the United States? Well, the large swells will be reaching the East Coast, and because of this, there'll be an elevated rip current risk. Some flooding advisories also in place. So before you hop in the water on the East Coast, make sure you check the flags and respect the flags as well. We also have Tropical Storm Beta, our newest system, churning there in the Gulf. Beta is expected to move to the north before interacting with a stationary front and taking a quick turn to the west. That means everyone on the South Texas and Southeast Texas coastline needs to be prepared for this system. And of course, here at Weather Nation, we're going to continue to cover all things tropics. More coming up.
Turning now to weather, Chief Meteorologist Aaron Christensen joining us right now. I'm just going to say, Aaron, it's probably a good thing those cruises aren't in the Atlantic at this moment.
You know, I definitely agree with you. There's a lot going on. There'd be too many things for those ships to have to dodge, no doubt. Let's give you a look at what we are working with. In case you missed it earlier, bears repeating. We had 3 storms pick up names today. That is the most number of named storms in a single day. We're still watching the remnants of Sally, the remnants of Paulette, Tropical Storm Beta, Hurricane Teddy, Tropical Storm Wilfred, a tropical wave off the coast of Africa, and post-tropical storm now Alpha. So with this record-setting day, earliest W named storm, earliest Alpha, earliest Beta, and by the way, only the second time in history we've had to start going into the Greek alphabet, the most named storms in a single day, and 6 newly named storms in 6 days. That previous record was 4 during 6 days. Our tropical storm Beta is looking a bit more interesting here tonight. Here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Now with winds at 60 miles per hour up to 65 tomorrow. By Sunday morning, still forecast to become a hurricane, Category 1. We see it tracking to the west and then just kind of straddling the Texas coast. But we do have some tropical alerts that have now been issued. We have a hurricane watch from Port Aransas to High Island, Texas. Tropical storm watches flanking that on either side. You see that in far southeast Texas as well as portions of Louisiana for that tropical storm watch. Storm surge watch also posted for the coast of Texas now. So this is looking a bit more serious. Although most of the computer model intensity forecasts keep it at a tropical storm. We hope that it does, but the latest track does have it becoming a hurricane. If that happens, we'll have to update this list here. This is our scorecard. Hurricanes would have to go to 9 and 2 major. We've now had 23 named storms as of today. And this is what beta looks like on our European model. We do see that center of circulation just straddling the coast there and then dumping a lot of rain from Texas through Louisiana. In fact, anywhere from about 5 to 12 inches worth of rain along the coast of Texas. Tropical storm Wilfred barely hanging on to tropical storm status tonight, but it is still a tropical storm. Not likely going to make any sort of landfall as it is expected to fizzle by early next week. We had what was subtropical storm Alpha made landfall earlier today on the coast of Portugal. Now post-tropical storm. This is going to be the last advisory issued by the National Hurricane Center on that. Watching the remnants of Paula, there's a 40% chance she will redevelop and a 20% chance that wave, once it gets over the water of the next couple of days, will pick up subtropical or tropical characteristics. Here's Hurricane Teddy as of tonight. Now back to Cat 4. Yeah, and staying at Cat 4 through tomorrow, but making its close approach to Bermuda, perhaps as a 3 or a 2 come Monday into Monday night. Then we see a potential Nova Scotia landfall by Tuesday. But Teddy's going to increase our waves, some coastal concerns, small craft advisory. Folks, this is not going to be the Sunday or Monday to be on the water. There's a 7-day forecast. Chance for rain increases to 60% tomorrow, 70 Sunday.
Good morning, everyone. Tracking the tropics. Time is 5:11. All eyes on Tropical Storm Beta right now with sustained winds of 60 miles per hour over the Gulf of Mexico. And it is going to be tracking towards the north very slowly at 8 miles per hour and then turn to the west in the next 24 hours. And it will likely become a hurricane by tomorrow afternoon with sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. It will make that turn to the northeast on Tuesday and Wednesday. That means this storm will be crawling to the northeast and then turning to the northwest on Monday and Tuesday, producing lots of rainfall in that area right along the coastline of Texas for the next couple of days until Tuesday and Wednesday. Hurricane Teddy, as of the 5 o'clock advisory, still a major hurricane, sustained winds of 125 miles per hour. Here's the latest forecast tracking towards the northwest and then going east of Bermuda on Monday and Tuesday, and then it will turn to the north on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tropical storm Wilfred, sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. This one we don't have to worry about it because it will dissipate by Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, we're talking about Hannah because, yeah, flashback to July. Still, anytime you have a tropical system threaten Texas, it's a flashback. Conservative people in Texas. This state's still waterlogged from Hurricane Hannah. That storm hammered parts of the state with more than 2 feet of rain. Another massive rainfall and flooding event could prove disastrous. And then you have the pandemic going on as well. Let's bring back in Dr. Postel to talk about the track of this and the impacts. And just like Sally, Dr. Postel, this thing is not moving very fast at all. 3 miles per hour is a healthy walking pace.
Right, and that's the problem because it's going to prolong the impacts for many of us along the Texas coast and areas even in Louisiana where right now, even though as the crow flies, the center of beta is a couple hundred miles offshore, we're getting a lot of rain in coastal Louisiana, New Orleans, gusting almost 30 miles per hour with a lot of thunderstorm activity lurking just offshore, even getting some rain reports across parts of Alabama. Yeah, Alabama as well from beta, which is a long way away. But at the bottom left part of your screen, you might see underneath that banner, there's a lot of lightning strikes going on. Let's have a look in there because there's some developments here over the recent few hours which are noteworthy. There's a center of low pressure. You can see the swirl in the beginning part of this loop right there. It's kind of been drawn underneath an area of convection or big thunderstorms. Now that's normal and you could expect that with a system like this over warm water and over the environment atmospherically that it's in. But if these thunderstorms last, let's say, a bit longer than 6 hours or so, then the pressure could actually respond noticeably. Yeah, it'll fluctuate a little bit, but it could really begin to drop, and then the winds really increase depending on how durable those thunderstorms are. We just have to wait and see what happens and wait for the next hurricane reconnaissance mission to go in there to find out exactly how it's evolving today. But do expect it to strengthen eventually to a hurricane. Right now, there is an upper trough, but it is moving away and weakening. A little bit of a dip in the jet stream has allowed some of the tilt in the storm, the asymmetry. In other words, most of the bad weather still is well off to the north and east of where the center of low circulation is, which is right there. That is associated with the wind shear, and that's what's happening right now. But that wind shear will relax a little bit, and the stronger winds aloft will back off and move to the north and allow Beta to kind of drift around across parts of the western Gulf of Mexico, if not onshore, which is a problem in its own right. But by early Monday, not much steering to push it away. It's going to be sticking and wobbling around across many of the same areas, bringing in rain, gusty winds, and coastal flooding. So we have all those hazards to deal with for a prolonged period based on the slow movement of Beta. And overall, this is what we've got with Beta, with a lot of rainfall yet to come. Back to you.
Yeah, big concern now. Take a live look right now in South Padre Island, Texas. Yeah, seeing a little haze out there, but also notice the surf kind of agitated here. Lots of whitecaps out there, or dealing with some waves. And we have high surf advisories in place for South Padre Island, Texas. Tropical Storm Beta, as it approaches the coast, it's going to slowly strengthen, which means more surf, more flood threats along the coast, not to mention inland heavy rain and freshwater flooding concerns as well. As Dr. Passell mentioned, we're seeing now convection right around the center, but we've been seeing convection rain well to the east and northeast of that center, which has brought plenty of rain across areas of Louisiana, coastal Mississippi. Even Dauphin Island, Alabama saw some rain. New Orleans seeing more rain now than they did with Sally. Look at all the rain to come, though, pushing on towards New Orleans, but eventually it pushes westward into Texas, including Houston, Victoria, Palacios, all going to see some rain on this, perhaps some heavy rain. That just goes through Tuesday. We'll see that rain perhaps through Thursday. European model now has been kind of pushing this on shore. The official track for the Hurricane Center also pushes the center on shore. But remember, there's weather even well off the center, and that weather's going to be rain even towards College Station, Brenham, Bryan, even Austin will see some rain. The Hill Country, San Antonio, you can flood easily too. That's going to be the issue there. But also Houston, days and days of rain. Wednesday, we still have rain falling, and eventually more rain pushes on towards Cameron Parish as well. Inland flood threat, coastal flood threat. It continues to be an ongoing thing. This is just through Monday, but I expect this to continue well into the end of next week as well. You can see the winds also an issue, especially close to that core and by the coast as well, with the winds coming in without the reduced by friction. But we do expect the winds to come close to being on shore late tomorrow night, but definitely by Monday, we see those tropical storm force wind gusts hit the coast. Not to mention waves, strong waves will be generated and then moving onshore as tropical storm, maybe Hurricane Beta, approaches as we head on through the rest of this weekend and into next week.
Arnulfo, gracias. A las 6:03 aquí, imágenes de satélite en vivo de la tormenta tropical Beta. El sistema en su segundo día se mueve a través del Golfo de México y todo indica que pudiera convertirse en el cuarto huracán en tocar la costa del Golfo esta temporada. Inés Sierra, ¿se mantiene ese pronóstico o algo ha cambiado en las últimas horas?
Muy buenas tardes, Yunieski, para ti y para los amigos de Telemundo 51. Pues según el último informe emitido por el Centro Nacional de Huracanes a las 5 de la tarde, se espera que Beta esté tocando tierra en algún punto en el centro de Texas como una tormenta tropical, pero lo estaría haciendo con vientos máximos sostenidos de 70 millas por hora, que es bastante cercana a esa intensidad de categoría 1, que recuerden que es de 74 millas por hora. Según este último informe, presentaba vientos máximos sostenidos de 60 millas por hora y está sin moverse, estacionario, como pueden ver. Se espera que esta noche comience a moverse lentamente hacia el oeste-noroeste y como ven en estos momentos tenemos avisos y vigilancias de tormenta tropical para sectores de Texas, también Louisiana, además de esa vigilancia de huracán para sectores al centro de Texas, pues como les mencionaba, se espera que el lunes se esté acercando y esté tocando tierra con vientos máximos sostenidos de 70 millas por hora. Se espera luego que el sistema comience a moverse más bien al nordeste y estaría pues debilitándose a una depresión tropical hacia el día jueves, pero estaría llevando supuesto, intensa lluvia en ese periodo de tiempo con acumulados que pudieran estar entre 8 a 12 pulgadas, incluso 20 en algunos sectores de Texas, también Louisiana, y por supuesto hay que vigilar esa poderosa marejada ciclónica con penetraciones del mar que pudieran estar cercanas a los 4 pies de altura. Pero recuerden que en el trópico hay otros sistemas que estamos vigilando, de ellos hablo más adelante. Ahora regreso con Yunieki.
That really is the big question going forward. How much more organization will we see with the storm, given what it's facing right now and given what it's likely to continue to face over the next couple of days? So the official forecast calling for some gradual strengthening up to 70 miles per hour as the storm is approaching the coast, so being just shy of hurricane strength. Now, we've got a new forecast package coming out from the Hurricane Center within the hour, so we'll see if they've made any changes to that. We've seen some lowering in the intensity model guidance here within the last few hours. And there you see the forecast from the Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m., again calling for it to be a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm getting towards the coast between Sunday and Monday, and then really slowing down and moving up and along the coast. But there is some chance, I think, that it won't be quite that strong, and I'll show you what is bothering the system. As you look at this right now, you look at the satellite and radar imagery together. We can't see all of the radar way out into the central part of the Gulf, but we can tell between these two things that it's just not very well organized right now. And part of the reason for that is that it's being sheared. There's wind shear. You know, a tropical cyclone has this idealized model where warm and humid air comes in at the base, rises up through thunderstorms that collect about the center of the circulation, and then goes out at the top. And if you've got wind shear interrupting that flow, interrupting that in, up, and out model, well, then it's not going to work as well, and those thunderstorms can be taken away from that low-level center, and then it's just not going to organize at all. So wind shear is present, but then also there is this crazy amount of dry air. All of that orange shading there in Texas and the Northwest Gulf and in Mexico, that's all dry air, and tropical cyclones don't like that at all. That tends to kill off the thunderstorms as they are trying to develop. And that's where it's headed. It's headed towards the west. So when you look at a lot of this model intensity guidance, a lot of it takes it to mid-grade tropical strength and then slowly weakens it after that. So I think it is possible that it doesn't get much stronger. Certainly that would be good news. That would mean a lessening of the wind threat. That would mean a lessening of the surge threat. However, it could still be a really serious rainfall threat, even if it's not a real strong storm. And part of the reason for that is that it's going to slow down. It's going to make its way to the west, most likely come into the coast or maybe just shy of that, and then slowly drift off to the northeast. So that slow forward speed is really, really important. And when you look at the model forecast here for rainfall, this is a blend of a lot of different models. We see a pretty large area of 3 to 5 inches of rain along the upper Texas coast, but it certainly could be heavier than that. There are some indications that we could get up above 5 inches, especially as you get closer to the coast. So Julie, regardless of whether or not this thing does manage to get its act together, I think we're looking at a rain threat, unless it's totally killed, which I wouldn't say is out of the realm of possibility at this point. But if we do see any sort of cohesive structure making its way to the coast there, I think we're going to be looking at a serious rain threat at a minimum.
We will continue to see plenty of dry time as we head into the early afternoon. It's not until late afternoon, early evening where we'll see some showers developing. And this is why a lot of dry air still over South Florida. You'll notice some green here across Central Florida. That's that area of low pressure we talked about, and the front that will slowly inch towards us here as we head into the start of the week. So let's talk about the tropics. We have out in the eastern Atlantic, Tropical Storm Wilfred, and then we have actually, it just, the 11 a.m. just came in, and now it is a remnant low-pressure system, so it's post-tropical. It's basically falling apart as it has been the last couple of days. Teddy remains a Category 2 hurricane, and in the Gulf of Mexico, we have Tropical Storm Beta with its eyes set on the southeast coast of Texas. That's expected to bring some heavy rainfall in the next day or so. But now the National Hurricane Center is keeping a close eye on an area of low pressure along that front that's over Central Florida. It's moving inland, so development is not anticipated with this system. Elsewhere, we have the remnants of, remember, Hurricane Paulette? Well, here we find it near the Azores, and it has a moderate chance of development, and we could see some development in the next couple of days.
Well, switching gears now, time for your tropical update, and Luke Doris has a lot to talk about. So many named storms out there.
Listen, Luke, how are my friends and my neighbors doing in that Gulf Coast region of Texas and that area? I know we've got a lot going on out there.
Yeah, that's Tropical Storm Beta, and it's a big rainmaker. They're going to have a flash flood threat there. Let's start here, though, in Florida this morning. Look at what we had roll through. You see that swirl brought a lot of rain to central parts of Florida. It's about to go over the Gulf Coast, and it has a chance, anyway, of forming. It's low. It's only 10%. It's moving away from us, so no impact for us, but nonetheless, something interesting there. Elsewhere, there's Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf. There's Hurricane Teddy. Wilfred's about to die out, and this used to be Hurricane Paulette, and it may reform. This one and Wilfred, not a threat to land, so we're not going to talk about those. Let's get back over here to Beta. Tropical storm, winds to 60 miles per hour, has its eye on the Texas Gulf Coast, could make a landfall sometime tomorrow, probably won't strengthen much, but it will bring wind and surge impacts to some degree. But again, it's slow motion, one of these just crawling storms that brings all that rain up to 20 inches in some spots isn't out of the question, and the flash flooding threat that goes with it. Here's Hurricane Teddy, misses Bermuda, but it will impact southeast Canada as a strong non-tropical low later on this week. But what it will do is, as hurricanes spin counterclockwise, drive a cold front down here to South Florida and bring us our first, maybe a little taste of fall, some lower humidity in there. You're going to want to hear about that. Details when I'm back. Larry.
Tropical Storm Beta takes aim at the Texas coast. You're looking live at Galveston, Texas, where you've got an angry Gulf of Mexico. Look at those waves, even at this hour. And rain that's been coming in and around Houston. Temperatures in the mid-70s, and winds, they're breezy tonight. Dangerous storm surge and heavy rains are going to be some of the issues, along with some serious flooding problems inland. Now, for the very latest on this storm, we want to head over to our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. And Dr. Knabb, what do you think is going to be the most concerning aspect of Tropical Storm Beta? Are we looking at the inland flooding? Are we looking at the coastal water rise, or a mixture of both?
It's going to be water, Chris, that's going to cause the biggest problem. But I think for some of folks, it's going to be both. But I think for most people, it's going to be the rain-induced inland flooding, because we just have such a big population at risk, and not just Houston and New Orleans, but Lake Charles. And so, I think water is going to be the big problem. Fresh water will affect the most people, but some will deal with both, because a tropical storm is definitely able to produce storm surge, and then whatever rain falls that tries to drain into the Gulf of Mexico will be hindered by that onshore push. And again, the big problem is that, yes, it's a tropical storm, not a hurricane, but it's a slow mover, and it's relatively large. So that's able to push the water onto the coastline a little more easily than if it was smaller. And a slower mover is able to dump a lot of rain and make it a longer duration event than a more fast-moving storm. Tropical storm warnings in for a large area, so it is going to be a wind event. We could have some spotty power outages, could have a few down trees here and there. Now, the gusts of wind have been, notable. Look at Lake Charles to 36, New Orleans to 32. Some of the buoys just offshore are gusting above 40 miles an hour. But Chris, here's the other thing too. We have this combination of beta and this easterly flow behind the front that is causing this onshore push. So it's not just in the storm surge warning area directly associated with beta. It is this coastal flood warning area for southeast Louisiana. So I think people in Louisiana will be surprised to find out how much they're being affected in this situation due to a combination of factors.
Yeah, look at Shell Beach, over 3-foot water rise already, and then similar scenes there in Galveston. All right, well, it's already been quite a busy hurricane season. Beta is the 22nd named storm of this Atlantic hurricane season alone. And this year, it's also the earliest that we've seen this many named storms. Looking back, we've already had 4 major storms in the U.S., including Hannah, which was a hurricane, Major Hurricane Laura, Isaias, and Hurricane Sally just recently. So let's bring in hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knabb for a closer look at why 2020 will be a year to remember when it comes to hurricanes.
Yeah, we've been counting them fast and furious, haven't we? Not just the named storms, where we're way above average, but a lot of those have been relatively weak and relatively short-lived. But we've had a number of hurricanes. We are tied for the second number of hurricanes up to this date in history in the Atlantic Basin. Now, there have been 7 other times that we've been up to 8 this time. Only 2005 has had more. The only saving grace, I guess, a little bit of good news, a little bit, is we haven't had as many major hurricanes on the wind scale as we did, say, in a year like 2005. But the big problem, too, here is not just how many storms overall, but where they've been going. We've had so many landfalls in the U.S. This, with Beta, could set a record for the 9th. So we're going to eclipse this 8 here pretty soon. And yes, the East Coast has had its share, but look at everything that's been happening in the Gulf of Mexico. And I really hate it, Chris, how we might have the effects of Beta getting into places like Southwest Louisiana that have already been affected by Laura.
Yeah, a lot of these folks still have tarps on the roof. They're still trying to clean up debris and get their homes put back together after their hit a few weeks back. Now, clearly, it's been a very busy hurricane season, and we're right still in the middle of it right now, with several more storms swirling in the Atlantic. So, Dr. Knapp, which storms, minus Beta, which storms are you most concerned about farther out in the ocean?
Well, definitely Teddy is going to take some headlines, not just because of affecting Bermuda and Atlantic Canada, but it's going to cause problems on the east coast of the U.S. And we got to watch a little something over the state of Florida, too. Can't skip this. This is part of the front that Sally got absorbed into, but now it's causing a little area of spin and thunderstorms that could get out of the Gulf. Small chance of redeveloping, but can't rule it out. Look at that swirl during the day today and blow up of thunderstorms here in recent hours. So it's at least a chance. But this was helped by daytime heating. We'll have to see if the Gulf of Mexico can help that sustain itself. Just another little something to watch, but this is a big something to watch. Category 2, Hurricane Teddy approaching Bermuda. Now, it looks like the center will pass just east of them, but that doesn't mean you can't get some tropical storm conditions there. They got a tropical storm warning there. And then Halifax could be directly affected by a hurricane strength system. And they've been hit before. But it's also going to be affecting the east coast of the U.S. because that northeasterly flow behind our front that went off the coast to make the weather good is making the ocean angry. High risk of rip currents that will last into tomorrow, along with coastal flood warnings and advisories. Could have some overwash onto some roads, all the way down into Florida, where we've got that onshore flow. That big high, creating that big pressure gradient between it and Teddy, that is already causing problems. But then, as Teddy moves farther and farther north, then it adds in the big swells. So the east coast of the U.S. could have some very dangerous and life-threatening conditions at the coast, so listen to those lifeguards. We'll stay with the Weather Channel as we continue to track Tropical Storm Beta as it approaches slowly the Texas Gulf Coast. Chris and I will be right back.
Tomorrow afternoon, not bad, and really nice Tuesday and Wednesday with lower humidity, really comfortable temperatures across South Florida. Tropics, here we go with Beta. This storm about ready to make landfall in Texas. Another landfall along the Gulf Coast. This one near Victoria, Texas, probably late tomorrow night, early on Tuesday morning. Big rain producer, maybe up to a foot of rain in parts of Texas. This is Teddy, now a Category 2 storm. That is Bermuda. The storm will come very close to Bermuda overnight and throughout the day on Monday. Then it heads quickly to the Canadian Maritimes as a Category 1 hurricane. Wind and rain in that part of the world as well. So there's Teddy, there's Beta. Wilfred, no more. Last advisory just written by the Hurricane Center. Paulette, I know you thought we were done with Paulette. She's trying to make a comeback. Even if she does, she poses no threat to anyone. And perhaps more importantly, later this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the tropics will be quiet for several days. And won't that be nice?
Now, 23 named storms so far in this hyperactive, record-breaking 2020 season, and there's still 6 weeks to go. So what do you say we have a look at our tropical update here and what we are going to be dealing with and what we are dealing with right now? First, we're going to start off with Beta. Winds at 50 miles an hour, and you can see that dry air that's getting pulled into it. But don't let that fool you. All right, look at the rain here into Louisiana. This actually could cause some significant flooding as we head over the next 3 days. And it does look like this beta will get caught up in a trough and brought eastbound. So you're going to see it all the way from, Corpus to Houston up into Mississippi as we head into our Friday as well. So that is going to be lasting with us for a while. Now, Teddy's actually going to cause a lot of issues along the East Coast, is already causing a lot of issues on the East Coast. Right now, Category 2 storm. And what's interesting about Teddy is it looks like it'll get up to about 105 and then go down. Mainly, one of the reasons is because the upwelling actually from Paulette. And there's a look at the path of Paulette, and that, of course, used up all the warm water at the surface and is pulling up cooler water, and is significantly cooler. 79 degrees. That is significantly cooler for a tropical entity, and it looks like Teddy will go over that. But even if it does, it is still right now propagating waves and combined with the high pressure causing water rises along the east coast of Florida. Nova Scotia, by the way, no stranger to hurricanes this September. We've had 7 landfalls overall. There's been over 20 some odd landfalls in Nova Scotia. But it's Teddy combined with this high pressure that is causing those water rises and those strong waves here all along the east coast, Kelly. We're seeing them anywhere from New England down into Florida.
So 2020, I feel like that's the new phrase of the year, right? 2020 has been stressful, to say the least.
Not the greatest beach day all around because it's cloudy and gloomy outside, and plus the waters are very rough. Now this right here, this is Tropical Storm Beta getting weaker right now, winds of 50 miles an hour. Beta expected to make landfall later today and then eventually start to work its way farther to the north, and by Friday, just an area of lower pressure. We still have Hurricane Teddy just to the east of Bermuda. Category 1 is expected to get a little bit stronger and then make a push towards southeastern Canada, no longer tropical at that time. Now, in the meantime, closer to home, the little disturbance that's moving through, the Hurricane Center is watching it, giving it a 20% chance of development over the next couple of days as it works its way to the south. And then we have another one near the Azores that has a moderate chance of becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm. So there's that heavy rain moving to the south. For us, still a couple of showers here or there, but the skies will start to clear later today. And then as we head into tomorrow, still a very windy day, but it is considerably less humid on the first day of fall. So tomorrow, 85 degrees, just a very comfortable day. Still breezy on Wednesday, nice and dry.
What's going on out there? Wicked weather this week, as well as Hurricane Teddy hits Bermuda and Tropical Storm Beta heads for Texas. Teddy's expected to trek north, as Steve mentioned, potentially hitting Maine and Nova Scotia in a few days. This storm is not expected to be devastating, but it will pack a punch with winds of up to 60 miles an hour. Meanwhile, Beta is moving toward Texas. Strong winds and storm surge are already causing problems in coastal communities. Some areas could get as much as 15 inches of rain.
We have the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center. The storm is now a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm, so not surprising that we're seeing a continuing decline in the intensity based on what's going on with the satellite picture. We're just not seeing a lot of thunderstorm activity about the center as the system continues to fight with very, very dry air that's been in place across Texas and the western Gulf. So that really helped us out in this case. In the visible satellite imagery, you can see that there's a lot of low cloud here, but not a lot of tall cloud, but there's also a lot of inertia. There's a lot of momentum. It takes a long time for these systems to spin down, even when they lose their convection or their thunderstorms. And so that has already built up the water, and we've got storm surge flooding. It is sound side flooding in Rockport and also in Port O'Connor. Just as we saw yesterday, it's more of an onshore flow as you get up into Galveston. And then part of the issue here also is that the baseline is changing, and so that makes it even a little bit worse. So storm surge warnings ongoing there across the upper Texas coast, and that will continue to be in place most likely through the rest of today. Now, here you see the current radar picture, and we have looked at some rotating storms coming in near Galveston. That is a new warning. Galveston County under warning right now. Let's take a look at the velocity data. This is interesting because there are actually 2 areas that are rotating. There's one right there, and there's another one right there, and you could make the case that there's another one behind that. So you've got a whole series of storms that are rotating right now, and tracking that forward, that's going to come up towards Texas City in just a few minutes, probably about 1:20 or so, moving towards the northwest at 25 miles per hour. And there will be an ongoing threat for tornadoes there from southeast Texas, also into southern Louisiana. The other part of the story we're following is the heavy rainfall there now into Brazoria County, getting up towards Pearland, edging towards Houston. It may eventually start to move up there, but we think the heaviest of rain is likely going to be in southern Harris County, northern Brazoria, and then points farther west as well, out along the Katy Freeway there and down the Southwest Freeway as well. And then it does begin to taper off as you get farther south and west. Here's a model forecast showing you how the rain does step up, most likely, there in the Houston metro through this evening. So again, it's going to be edging northward, and certainly where the rainfall rates are heavier, we will have more opportunity for heavy rain, for flooding, and then that does begin to move north up into the eastern part of Texas, Piney Woods there, going into later Tuesday.
Tropical storm Beta causing some serious flooding in parts of Texas before even making landfall.
Let's get to hurricane specialist Brian Norcross with the latest on the storm's path and the tropical moisture we're feeling right here in South Florida. Brian.
Yeah, we're getting it. It's actually loosely connected to Beta. Here, take a look at where Beta is right now, just about to make landfall. This was the 2 o'clock position, and now it's moved a little closer to the coast here in just a few hours. The center will cross the coast, but the main bad weather is up here in the Houston-Galveston area, but really the winds and whatnot are not much different than we have on our coast here. Same kind of periods of heavy rain, and they may have some local flooding, but anyway, this is not too big a deal. As far as where it's going, it is going to drag its moisture ashore and then back up this way, so they do have a flood threat once all that moisture gets inland in the higher elevations. But it's slowly going to wind down. This isn't going to be one of the big storms of the year. All right, here's the deal. There is Beta over there on the left, and then you have this channel of moisture that goes and connects over into the hurricane. That's Hurricane Teddy that's over by Bermuda. And, of course, there's a cold front involved in that. The winds behind that front are pushing it down and pushing it through, but that's the tropical moisture that's making it so nasty outside here this afternoon. Now, here's what's going to happen and why we're watching this from a tropical standpoint. Sometimes along fronts, you get a little spinning going. Hurricane Center is just keeping half an eye on that. It's a small chance, but it's a possibility that once the front goes back about Thursday, kind of leaves that hanging out down here. They've got a 20% chance of something developing there. We'll just keep an eye on it. No sign of a real system there yet. Teddy is passing by Bermuda. They're getting what they're going to get. It's 100 mile an hour, going to be a 100 mile an hour hurricane, 90 miles an hour right now. Moving on off to the north, we're going to get updates on all this coming up here in just a few minutes from the National Hurricane Center.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Meteorologist Mike Seidel as Beta is crawling towards the Texas coast. It's been moving so slowly. Now 5 miles an hour to the northwest. It is 25 miles southeast of Port O'Connor, Texas. So that's going to bring it in probably near or just north of us later on this evening at that rate. And you can see what we're dealing with. This is the worst that Beta's thrown at us over the past hour. We had a pretty good squall come through as far as the rainfall rate. We're now over an inch of rain so far today. So we're not getting, this is not Sally. We're not going to get double-digit rainfalls here. Not a chance. We don't have enough moisture. The one reason is because we got so much dry air, and that's one of the reasons that Beta did not strengthen to a hurricane. It tried yesterday. It tried several times to really fire up, but every time the convection blew up, the dry air came in, got entrained, got sucked into it, and there you go. Kaput. Not completely kaput, but right now we have a 45 mile an hour tropical storm, and you can see this is pretty frothy. Not your best fishing day here for redfish, and I know the fishermen want to get back out, but it's going to be a few days. Not today, not tomorrow. Maybe by Thursday, things will wind down a little bit because this is a slow-moving system. Certainly the wind field will wind down. And again, reminding you, this is not the Gulf. This is Matagorda Bay. The Gulf is way out there. You can't see it. Not enough visibility as far as the barrier island, and that's blocking the big waves from rolling all the way in here. That's not the case at Aransas. We've seen the pictures from Galveston Island, Jamaica Beach, big waves battering the beaches and eating up the sand. So a lot of beach erosion. Again, coastal impacts by far will be the story with this one, and we'll see if we have any significant rainfall impacts inland, Mike. So far as I know, we haven't had our first flash flood warning. Let's hope this rain that comes in keeps moving like it's doing here, and we're not getting the big training bands like we've seen in previous systems.
That's the big hope here, Mike. It looks rough there, but, you know, I think we can get through this as long as Beta behaves and moves along as predicted in the forecast here. Mike, thank you so much, but it's going to be rough here for, you know, next day or two, that's for sure. By the way, new video to show you here, the 61st Street Pier in Galveston, Texas. Mike was talking about those waves. They've been a lot more significant in the upper Texas coast, and that's been the result. Boy, taking out parts of that pier and into the drink it goes. You hate to see stuff like this, but on the way it floats. The folks, there's a real danger in that water. Boy, you want to be nowhere near it, that is for sure. Even with a weak low-end tropical storm like we have now, it's just the persistence of it that can really do a number on structures like piers like that. A 45-mile-per-hour winds right now, so again, it's a lower-end tropical storm. Northwest movement at 5. We're really, really close to the coastline at this point, almost at us at Port O'Connor here, and we're going to be drifting off to the northwest here pretty slowly here, about 5 miles per hour. But you can see there's hardly anything to it. It doesn't have much, you know, at least on the signature of the infrared satellite, it doesn't have much to it. You look at the visible satellite, it's kind of hard to even figure out where exactly the center is. Is it, you know, was it maybe down in here? Is it sitting up in here somewhere? Is it maybe right on the coastline already? It's a little bit hard on the visible to determine where that is. You know, maybe the hurricane hunters have figured that, or they can get some different technology we can use besides the planes. But at this point, it's basically there, I would say. Corpus Christi, gust to 26, but notice the wind direction is coming out of the northwest here. Houston, 17, Lake Charles, 22, and gusty even over towards, say, New Orleans at 22 miles per hour. Here come the bands, different bands of rain that'll roll through Port O'Connor, where Mike is getting hit now, and there could be times where you're going to get breaks. Then you're going to get right back into it. And then the showers on the extreme other side of this, up around, say, Grand Isle, Louisiana. So as it moves slightly inland, may hug the coastline here, maybe inland, maybe just offshore, but then pushing off to the north and east here, Jackie, over the course of the next 5 days. So slow move initially, picking up speed at the end of its life.
Well, in the meantime, the East Coast has been feeling the effects of a hurricane, too. This is Hurricane Teddy, which is more than 800 miles away from the North Carolina coast. That's where huge swells have been washing up ashore. North Carolina officials were forced to close a portion of Highway 12 that runs through the Outer Banks yesterday because of all the overwash and sand. In addition, Teddy is creating dangerous rip current conditions all along the Atlantic beaches. So Teddy has been tracking just to the east of Bermuda today, and it's actually expected to intensify as it continues to move on up towards the north. It's going to hook up with the jet stream, and that will allow it to intensify a little bit as it moves up to the north and then makes a close approach to the Canadian Maritimes, perhaps making landfall into parts of Nova Scotia. Not all that often that you'll see tropical storm watches and warnings there, but the way it's affecting us has to do with that cool blast and high pressure that we have up and down the eastern seaboard. That's creating a very strong gradient between the two pressures and that northerly flow, and that is what's pushing up that water, combined with unusually high tides to bring our storm surge flooding up and down the east coast.
At least through 4 o'clock in the morning. Now remember, Paulette, that was a storm that happened a few weeks back. Well, it's come back to life as of 11 p.m. 60-mile-per-hour winds just south of the Azores. That's just going to move towards the east and fall apart. We are still tracking Hurricane Teddy north of Bermuda. That will eventually make landfall across the Canadian Maritimes. The disturbance that's sitting over us, National Hurricane Center is giving it a very small chance that it could develop over the next 5 days in this area highlighted. And then Beta, once it makes landfall tonight, it should be the first Greek-named system to impact the continental United States. That'll be something interesting to see. It's going to be a weak system, but it's going to dump a lot of rain there across the coast. Now, we're going to be stuck between Beta and Teddy to the east. The front will drop south. It's going to be very nice tomorrow. Highs in the mid-80s, but very little humidity. It is going to feel great, fall Florida style. And then by Wednesday, everything is looking pretty good. High pressure building in. By Friday, however, the front comes back up north with plenty of moisture, bringing us a better chance of rain.
But now that salt water, as we get more into high tide and the onshore push persists, any rainwater that tries to drain through the bay and out into the Gulf is going to have a harder time doing it. And that salt water flooding all by itself, Mark, produces a life-threatening situation, least dangerous to be out on the road. So whether it's fresh water, salt water, or both, this slow-moving storm going to hang around for a couple more days to continue to cause primarily water problems.
Yeah, and Dr. Nab, as you were speaking, the National Hurricane Center did call a landfall. That southern tip of the Matagorda Peninsula, the official landfall point. We'll get some graphics on that and be able to show it to you. But again, the main point is that landfall is not the end of this. Most of that circulation is still over the Gulf. Doesn't change our forecast at all and doesn't change the impacts at all. So meteorologically interesting. The landfall occurred. There may be another one of those as it works its way over, you know, the waters in between the peninsula and then getting back onto the rest of Texas. But we know that the rain is still the big story. So, Dr. Nab, with more of this rain on the way, you know, it's one thing that, you know, academically to say landfall occurred, but gosh, it is. We're not done. Sometimes landfalls, like you can say, you know, at least some sort of sigh of relief. I don't think this is the storm for that.
No, and I want to get across a few really key points about landfall. As this news spreads far and wide, especially in southeast Texas, we got to make a few important points. Now, one is just to define it. You know, hasn't this been near the coast like all day? Why hasn't landfall occurred yet? Up until now, is because you have to have the exact center of circulation of the tropical cyclone to cross land. And if you look on the radar, you can kind of see how the radar echoes are circulating around where the center is. And now we are, you know, having the exact center. You know, pardon my artistry needing a little bit of work there, but you get the point. That is the center of the circulation crossing the coastline, even though the circulation center has been just within a few miles of the coast essentially all day long. But the other big point to make is that this is just the beginning of what will probably be a 2-day, maybe plus, tropical storm wind, onshore flow and storm surge and heavy rain and flooding event, because, you know, now we've had landfall. But 24 hours from now, Mark, it probably won't be in a much different place than it is now, and it actually could spend quite a bit of time right near the coast. I mean, if it really wants to get on our nerves, it'll come back offshore, make a landfall, come back offshore, make a landfall. You know, so, you know, we could get really tired of this being right near the coast.
Yeah, and I think we will, at least to some degree, get at least one more of those, if not multiple, because after it crosses over the Matagorda Peninsula, it goes back over water, then it hits land again, and so we might get a couple more of these statements. But gosh, with this movement so slowly, it's going to take time to get even from where it is now onto the main body of Texas.
And I'll say the headline is landfall, but really the main word we should be thinking of is waterfall. I mean, that is really going to be the biggest problem.
As we go to the tropical update, Tropical Storm Beta made landfall last night as it's moving over the Gulf Coast states. It made landfall just north of Corpus Christi, south of Houston. The winds are at 40 miles per hour as of the 5 a.m. advisory, moving northwest at 3. This system is expected to continue to bring flooding concerns across the Gulf Coast states. Hurricane Teddy has winds of 100 miles per hour. This system headed towards the northwest, racing at 28 miles per hour. As we go to Tropical Storm Paulette, yes, this was the system that we were watching over the northeastern half of the Atlantic. It regained tropical storm strength. And it has winds of 60 miles per hour, moving east-northeast at 17 miles per hour. One more area we're watching is actually the area that moved through South Florida yesterday. It has a 10% chance of tropical cyclone development in the next 5 days.
Okay, and so we're getting that onshore flow. That's what's bringing that water rise to Tevin, and the water rise in and around Houston is because of the tremendous rainfall that we've seen there. All right, so let's have a look. And you know, someone pointed it out to me. I really quite enjoy constructive criticism. And I'm the type of person, I don't get into it with trolls on the internet, I don't care. But someone did say that I say all right a lot. And I was like, you know what? I do say that a lot. So I need to, you know how we all have like little catchphrases that we say? And I just caught myself saying it.
It's all right.
So we're going to try to fix that.
It's all right.
It's all right.
All right.
All right, so here's that onshore flow. Tevin, by the way, just over the bridge from Galveston, right here in this area. But look at all the rain coming down on our flash flood warning. That is just strictly flooding rainfall for us here into Houston. Water rescues going on. Look over the last hour. We've seen less than an inch of rain. Many of us not even seeing a half inch. But over the last 48 hours, we've seen a foot here into Pearland. You know, these areas see 4 to 5 inches for the entire month of September. We're seeing twice that in 2 days. That is what's causing flooding. And it's very likely that we'll continue to see it as everything rotates around. But don't forget, you're going to get some dry slots into these areas as well. And so the problem is, Jim, that this is just such a slow mover.
That is. All right, look at what we've dealt with Sally, for goodness sake, the kind of rainfall. All right, so here we go. Hurricane Teddy kicking up the surf and the surge, fueling flooding from Florida to the Outer Banks to Maine. Businesses in Fort Lauderdale actually seeing parking lots submerged and water almost coming into the windows. Highway 12, by the way, has closed near Rodanthe. I don't know if they got it reopened because they moved pretty quickly there, but it's going to close again today during the high tide times because water's going to come rushing up there. Teddy on track for a Wednesday landfall near Halifax, Nova Scotia as a Cat 1. It's a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane right now, but it's gotten linked up with a front. So you kind of like, wow, so this is all like a part of Teddy. And it goes all the way back to Beta, for goodness sakes. The analysis this morning on the Ocean Prediction Center was just awesome to look at. So here you can see Teddy, 100-mile-an-hour Cat 2 here. It's also hauling, so there's like 50 knots of shear on the southwest side. It's also moving north, moving northwest at about 28. So net shear is about 20 miles per hour in through here. And notice the wind field. This thing's over 300 miles wide, just huge wind field, 345 miles wide. So that is pushing the waves back to the west. It is also pushing it north toward Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as well. Going to come in as a Cat 1 more than likely tomorrow morning. Welcome to fall, by the way, in Canada. And there's the analysis this morning from the OPC, the Ocean Prediction Center. Look at that thing. Front dangling all the way from, heck, the UK back into the Gulf and then back in toward Texas. Now, along the south end of this front, and this is what happens this time of the year. You have convection, you have some thunderstorms down through here, an old boundary of sorts. When that gets left behind and conditions become a little bit more favorable, there's always a chance that something could spin up down and through here, even though it's unlikely in this case. The Hurricane Center is keeping an eye on it. And Paulette. It's okay to feel a little tropical and a little extra tropical at the same time, right? Because there's a lot of characteristics with both of these entities that are similar. So now we've got Paulette that went from a hurricane, all right, to a subtropical, to a extratropical storm, now back to a tropical, sitting there near the Azores, and it's going to do a loop-the-loop here, of course, to the Azores belonging to Portugal. This is another Portugal island down and through here that it's going to come on through and then eventually dissipate.
Yeah, this is so slow moving here, Beta is. It's just creeping along. The movement now officially northeast at about 2 miles an hour. And Houston's on the right-hand side, the eastern-hand side of the storm. So the moisture comes up and around Beta and then comes right in from Galveston, up and through Houston, and then streams northward out across eastern Texas here. It's been doing that for the past day or so. It will continue to do that for the next day or so. So the rainfall is going to continue, and then the rain's also going way up high out across Arkansas. We have scattered showers because of it out across Mississippi, Alabama. New Orleans has stayed relatively dry, but a big mass of rain is right there just off the southeastern coastline of Louisiana. And again, quickly here, where does Beta go? Well, by tomorrow, it's right there over Houston, and then it slowly takes a trip to the north and the east, right over Lake Charles, Louisiana. There is going to be a lot of rainfall there, too.
Fall looks fantastic. Temperatures eventually into the 70s with partly cloudy sky. Chance for a quick shower, but nothing significant. All right, quick look at the tropics. We have, of course, Beta, which is the last advisory issued from the Hurricane Center about an hour ago. So this is the last time you'll see this. Some rainfall through the northern Gulf Coast. We have Teddy, which is trying to gain a little bit of convection near the center. This one is holding on, and the winds at 90 miles an hour and make a landfall in Nova Scotia tomorrow morning, and then eventually up in towards Greenland. At this point, it's what we call post-tropical. So it's already lost a lot of its tropical characteristics. It has a comma-shaped cloud cloud pattern, which is more typical of fall storms rather than tropical weather like hurricanes and tropical storms. And we also have Paulette, which regenerated last night, and it is just kind of meandering out here and eventually dissipates late in the week.
Rain chances do increase for the Palm Beaches and the Treasure Coast. Now, some good news. For the first time since September 7th, we do not have a named storm in the Atlantic Basin. How about that? 2 weeks. This is what's left of Beta, no longer classified as a tropical system, just rain there. You can see also what's left of Teddy. It's no longer a classified system. And Paulette, that zombie storm, last week it was a Cat 2 storm. It died, came back last night. Well, it's died again. During the last 2 weeks, we've had 8 named storms and 3 hurricanes, but nothing tonight. And the good news from the Hurricane Center, we are not expecting any named storms or any tropical activity for at least the next 5 days. So finally, good news, at least temporarily.
All right, so let's talk about what's left of Beta here, as it's sitting right near Liberty, Texas, which is east of Houston, west of Beaumont, kind of west of Louisiana. But you can see this huge slug of moisture, which is coming all the way up into Tennessee, into southern Kentucky for that matter, and another band of rain, which is kind of closing in on Baton Rouge, where we've gotten flash flood warnings out in both of these locations. This is still deep tropical moisture. It is still being pulled to the north and still being squeezed out with rainfall rates at 1 to 3 inches an hour. So the largest area we've been watching is still going on here, and the eastern push of this is not very fast at all. So Beauregard, Calcasieu, Vernon Parish, these are all areas, remember, that were very hard hit by Laura in terms of tree damage. We just had a whole package on that and the tremendous losses to the timber industry in the state of Louisiana. They're getting soaked right now. So you can see this rain footprint, which is going to go up in through Mississippi, Alabama, North Georgia, eastern Tennessee, and southern Appalachia, where we will get less and less rain the farther northeast we go. But lots of rainfall here coming for the next couple of days in these areas. So post-tropical storm Teddy, it's a big one. The wind field with these, the tropical entities that's very close to the eye, well, it's spread out. Now it's well away from the eye. It's about 1,000 miles wide when you look at it. So an incredible size storm, a typical post-tropical cyclone in the North Atlantic in the late season, in the late part of the season. But we're all post-tropical everywhere. And that's kind of cool to see. How you wake up tomorrow morning on NBC's map, maybe even later on this afternoon, you won't see anything out there. All right, but that doesn't mean we won't have anything. All right, so we'll keep an eye on what happens with a little disturbance, which is going to come in Cuba and make its way off in toward the Gulf. None of the models do anything with that. There's another front here by the time we get to October 1st. But will there be something here in the Western Caribbean? Because this is the time of the year where we start looking toward that way, kind of like we do in the first part of the season. Time will tell.
Time now for your tropical update, and latest advisories are in. We still got 25% left of the hurricane season still to go. We're going to get through this together, and typically in October you see that little spike there. That's oftentimes leftover cold fronts that can turn into tropical cyclones. But here we go. We got Tropical Depression 25, an area to watch in the East Pacific, and also farther off towards the east in the Caribbean. And then look at Hurricane Marie, powerful major hurricane that we are tracking here off the coast of Mexico. All right, so let's start here with Tropical Depression 25, the 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. This is the 5 p.m. Latest advisory. And again, keeping this a tropical depression. However, the National Hurricane Center emphasizing that this will likely become a tropical storm as early as tonight. So don't let your guard down. Likely going to be seeing the name Gamma. So if you hear Tropical Storm Gamma, know that that's what this is. This whole cluster of storms certainly looking quite healthy, at least at this stage in its lifetime. 155 miles southeast of Cozumel, so not too far from land, and we are expecting impacts here. And because of that, tropical storm warnings are up for much of the Yucatan Peninsula, especially here around Cancun to Cozumel. And then tropical storm watches beyond that. So where does it go? Is this going to be a factor for the U.S.? Well, in the short term, no. We may get some moisture pulled up into Florida. The storm is heading in this direction, but some of that moisture is going to be kind of pulled up along our boundary. So I don't want it to confuse anybody, but we expect this to push off towards the west early next week. So direct landfall, not likely, at least for the U.S. at this point. However, what happens when it gets out to here? Notice the hurricanes that are now upping these speeds to about 60 miles per hour. So a stronger tropical storm in the southern Gulf. And again, Gamma, the next name on the list. Now, if we were to get another named storm after that, that's Delta. This would be our 26th tropical depression if this does develop. And again, a medium chance, 40% chance that this could develop over the next 5 days, especially early next week, into the Western Caribbean, where our tropical depression is currently. And here in the East Pacific, we're looking at Hurricane Marie. Latest advisory here, bringing this 130 miles per hour. That makes it a Category 4. Pressure down to 948 millibars. And movement to the west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. The good news is this is over 1,000 miles away from the Baja California. But what a storm, a textbook-style hurricane, and one that we're continuing to watch here as it pulls off towards the west into cooler waters and likely weakening.
Another named storm, and right now we are looking at Cancun, Mexico. You're under a tropical storm warning as Tropical Storm Gamma actually makes its approach. The storm is expected to make landfall sometime tonight or early tomorrow before moving into the Gulf of Mexico. But as you can see, already feeling the impacts there, the trees whipping around. You can clearly see that the sea is also pretty stirred up. So let's talk about it. This might feel like, oh, we're doing this all over again. We had a nice break for quite some time, but hey, look, our map is filled with circles once again. Maybe not quite as many as we had previously, but still quite a few circles. Areas to watch: Tropical Storm Gamma and, in fact, Major Hurricane Maria churning its way through the Pacific. The good news about Maria is it could actually get swept up and bring some beneficial rain to the Pacific Northwest. But let's talk about Gamma. This is not beneficial rain coming down in this amount anyways. Winds at 65 miles per hour, so this is a strong tropical storm, about 40 miles south-southeast of Tulum, the center. But as we know, the reach of these impacts far outside the center. So as we look at this forecast, it looks like the National Hurricane Center really following closely kind of what the European model is wanting to do and taking it down into the southern Gulf of Mexico, impacts around the Bay of Campeche. But before we're all said and done with this, western Cuba going to get quite a bit of rain. We're going to see tons of rain falling across the Yucatan Peninsula as well. So we do have that tropical storm warning. Cozumel, Tulum, you're included in that. And then tropical storm watches as you look a bit farther south. Here's what it looks like right now on the satellite. But as mentioned, as you saw earlier, it's not just Gamma that we have to think about. It's this second wave that's behind it, moving through the Caribbean at this point just south of Hispaniola. A medium chance of development in the next 5 days. So once again, Paul, we know this happens. We expect that little blip, that little peak once again in October, and here we are.
That's right, not over quite yet.
Get further down to the south, Orlando to Tampa, Miami, and we still see a lot of the tropical moisture. Now, this has been here for days, actually, and this is the outlier. This is where we had a stationary boundary that was sitting there. It went all the way up into the North Atlantic, actually, and I'll show you some satellite images in a few moments that'll back that up. But the moisture is still coming north, right over to Palm Bay I-95, coming north out of Lake Okeechobee, or down to the south into Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or Coral Springs. Keys getting some rain here around Isla Mirada, all the way down to the south into the Key West area, and those are going to be heavy downpours. Now, look, it's about this time, too, when we may end up showing some water spouts from time to time on the radar imagery, because all this moisture is associated with the storm that is sitting down there in Cancun into the Yucatan Peninsula at the moment. And a couple of things that we're looking at there down in this area is that we are going to, in fact, have the rain on the outer edges come back up into South Florida again from the western side, first of all, into the Key West area. Western Cuba getting plenty of heavy rainfall here as well. The red's indicating the colder cloud tops, where we have the higher cloud tops. Those are the ones that are producing most of the heavier rainfall. And right now, the center of our storm is right there just to the west of Cozumel, the island of Cozumel, south and west of Cancun. Winds are at 65 miles per hour. We almost had a hurricane here a couple of times during the early part of the day today. I was watching Recon. They're not flying at the moment over land, but was watching them. And some of these barometric pressures were starting to bottom out there for a little bit. But right now, when we get back out over the open water, we got a channel here that's always chilly right there along the beach, the northern beach. But as we get back out into the Bay of Campeche, we are expecting some re-strengthening. And Caroline has some more information about that, where we do think we're going to see a storm going back out into the open Atlantic. Cozumel, Mexico, this is from earlier in the day today. Some of those breakers and waves really getting higher and higher through the early part of the day, Caroline.
That's right. That was when it was moving on land there in Cozumel, Mexico. Now, I do want to point out with the most recent update from the National Hurricane Center, it just came out. Winds now down to 65 miles per hour. Previously, they were saying 70. No surprise that we're seeing a decrease, but it's interesting to note that it's moving over land right now, and it didn't decrease too much, partially because a lot of it's still over water there. Yucatan only so large, but it did make landfall earlier today with maximum winds around 70 miles per hour. This happened around 11:45 a.m. Central Time, and it was about 35 miles just to the southwest of Cozumel, Mexico. That's where they were seeing a lot of those tropical alerts. And key messages for Gamma, we still do have those hurricane and tropical storm warnings in places for portions of Mexico with heavy rain, flash flooding likely. Those are going to be some major concerns, especially as it takes its turn to the left. It'll continue to bring rainfall to the Yucatan. We are expecting it to stay in Mexico and really the southern Gulf, which is good news here in the States, but we can see some of those larger swells giving us an elevated rip current risk, especially along southern Texas coastlines. You'll notice those tropical alerts are including a hurricane warning from Cancun down through Cozumel and also some tropical storm warnings, in addition to a tropical storm watch on that far side of the Yucatan for after that system passes over. Now, wind speeds from this morning, you'll notice several places, including Cozumel, seeing wind gusts in the 40-mile-per-hour range. Cancun saw a gust around 32 miles per hour. Now, when you look at this, it might not seem too impressive, but I do want to point out that it wasn't just wind gusts. They also had sustained winds that were rather intense for a good amount of time, and that's where we start to see the issues. Current wind speeds right now around Cancun coming from the southeast about 22 miles per hour. You can see that rotation here with the highest wind gusts. It's seeming to be over the Gulf. Certainly good news there, but Gamma Rain reports that this is where we're going to be really seeing a lot of the problems. Cozumel, over 2.5 inches of rain, a tremendous amount of rainfall, and we're going to continue to see rainfall all across portions of Mexico and Belize as well. You'll notice we're going to watch Gamma as it moves its way out back into the Gulf. That's by Sunday morning, maintaining tropical storm force winds. In fact, strengthening back to about 60 miles per hour. And it's going to be taking a very dramatic turn to the left. It's that high pressure system and that stationary front that's really preventing it from going north. And that's going to continue on its path, bringing with it a lot of rainfall for Mexico. Now, here are our spaghetti models, and typical spaghetti model fashion, you're always going to have a few outliers. A lot of them are going to be going based on climatology and different computer outputs, and so it's easy to discount a few, but what we want to do is we want to look for the consensus. The consensus is that it is going to be taking that stark turn and heading due to the west. Of course, we've got that high pressure system that's going to help steer it, and this is just one of our forecast models showing heavy downpours into the evening hours, moving its way to the north and then eventually taking that steer to the west, and that's going to continue to bring heavy rainfall, not just to the Yucatan, but to portions of Mexico and some of that moisture even extending over towards Miami.
Now, 7 weather with meteorologist Erica Delgado.
Their latest as far as Tropical Storm Gamma. This was the advisory as of 8 a.m. We're waiting the 11 a.m. advisory with wind speeds up to 50 miles per hour, and it has slowed its forward speed, only moving at 4 miles per hour. You can see the extensive cloud cover extending across all of Florida. That tropical moisture has been affecting us here in South Florida since yesterday. Latest forecast track keeps it as a tropical storm meandering over the extreme southern Gulf of Mexico, and in the days to come producing heavy rainfall across the Yucatan Peninsula, and then eventually by the middle to end of the work week producing heavy rainfall across Mexico. However, all of that moisture still spreading across Florida, and you can see it by the shades of green. We're seeing it mostly in the form of clouds, but still our western coast here of Florida and even down into the lower Keys continuing to see that rain here. And you can see those showers now moving through the lower Keys, heavy downpours as well, heavier, and some thunderstorms across the Gulf Coast. And up and down the East Coast metro areas, we've seen a few passing showers, fast moving. You can see a cluster here approaching Broward coastal areas.
I'm Weather Channel meteorologist Jeff Morrow, keeping you updated on a brand new tropical system which is forming in the central and western Caribbean. Not to be confused with already formed Tropical Storm Gamma. This is a new system, potential tropical cyclone 26. Maximum sustained winds right now at about 35 miles an hour, and it is moving west-northwest at about 10 miles an hour. Now, here's Jamaica. And this is the system we're talking about right here. Not what you're looking at over here on the right-hand part of the screen, but right there in the middle. In fact, the center probably, if there is one, right about there where I'm putting the arrow, about 75 miles south of Kingston, Jamaica right now. There is some upper-level wind shear going on here at the present time, and that's why the system isn't rapidly developing, but is expected to. There's some northeasterly wind shear. You can see some of these clouds here moving rather rapidly off toward the western part of the Caribbean. So it is encountering that shear, which is going to delay development a bit. But that shear is expected to lessen, and we could have a tropical storm on our hands by tomorrow. In fact, that is the forecast right now, and that would be Tropical Storm Delta. 40 miles an hour is the expected forecast strength as we head through the day on Monday, all the way up to 70 by Tuesday afternoon. Still a strong tropical storm, but by the time it passes the west coast of Cuba, we're talking about a hurricane here, folks. And maybe by the time it gets up here into the northern parts of the Gulf of Mexico, it could be a Category 2 hurricane. You can see here on the left-hand side, by Thursday afternoon into Friday afternoon, that's when we could have winds upwards of 100 miles an hour. So this could very well be, and in fact, it's expected to be Tropical Storm and then Hurricane Delta. Again, not to be confused with what's going on. There's another system off the northern parts of the Yucatan right now. That's Tropical Storm Gamma. That's expected to move off here toward the southwest into the Bay of Campeche. And these two may interact somewhat. We're not quite sure about that. But the forecast here for this tropical cyclone would be up into the central Gulf. And right now, it looks like it could impact the north central Gulf. We're talking Louisiana, perhaps over to Alabama and southern Mississippi once again. If that sounds familiar, yeah, we've seen a lot of tropical activity there over this season so far, and it looks like that's continuing here into October. Right now, we have tropical storm warnings out for the Cayman Islands, but again, by the time this system heads up to between Cancun, Mexico, and the western parts of Cuba, it could very well be a hurricane. That is the forecast. So hurricane watches are up there, including for the Isle of Youth, this little island right here south of Cuba. Now let's take a look at the computer models, and they pretty much all agree, at least these are the major models, that it moves up into the central Gulf, then kind of makes a right-hand turn and heads up toward southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, or Alabama. Now, this would be by Friday that we're talking about a potential landfall. But again, that is still many, many days away, 5 days away, and this track, obviously, as you go out in time, it could vary quite a bit. We could be talking anybody from Texas all the way over into Florida really needs to pay attention to the forecast here, as this forecast track may vary. But right now, this is what our computer models are telling us. So just to reiterate now, we have potential tropical cyclone 26, which may soon be Tropical Storm or even Hurricane Delta as we head over the next couple of days. Of course, we'll keep you updated here on the Weather Channel throughout. I'll have another update on this system 1 hour from now.
Again, live radar showing you those incoming showers. So let's take a look at the bigger picture with the future track. We have that frontal boundary to the north of us still, well off into the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look at that. That is Tropical Storm Gamma that we're watching, and it's a pretty healthy storm out there. We have another area that we're watching as well. This is in the Caribbean, and it's soon to be Delta late, or rather early in the morning hours for tomorrow. So let's start off with Tropical Storm Gamma, 11 p.m. advisory. And earlier it was stationary, not moving. Now we have some movement, not much, but it is moving east at 2 miles per hour. Wind sustained at 60, continuing in that path. So it is going to work its way off to the southeast, or rather east, and then make that little curve to the south. And then look what happens after that. It starts to make a curve to the north once again. And then here's the secret. Areas of low pressure want to follow other areas of lower pressure. So we have potential tropical cyclone which is going to be well ahead of it, and we're going to see this kind of trailing it behind. So let's take a look. Tropical depression number 26 already. So it was potential tropical cyclone. Now it's a official depression. It's going to work its way past Jamaica, then passing over Cuba, and then strengthening into a Category 1 hurricane, as it is going to be in the open waters. And then it has the potential to further strengthen Category 2. So this is going to be a strong storm. It could even become a Category 3, unfortunately, before making landfall somewhere between Texas and, well, as far east as the Panhandle of Florida. So again, normally around 30–40% of the time, these storms do stay within this cone of uncertainty. And again, as I mentioned, we could see Gamma trying to follow up after Delta. So that's going to be the next named storm on the Greek alphabet list. And you know, the last time we saw the Greek alphabet was back in 2005.
Starting to see some showers as well as near Aventura and North Miami and Miami Shores. But other than that, right now it's quiet everywhere else. The wind out of the southeast, 8–12 miles an hour. Temperatures already close to the mid-80s. Look at that, 84 in Fort Lauderdale, 83 in Miami, 79 in Weston, low to mid-80s down through the Keys. And watching two areas in the tropics, tropical storm Gamma right now that is in the Gulf of Mexico. And then we have tropical depression number 26, which is in the central Caribbean. So we will begin with tropical storm Gamma, which is a forecast to move generally to the west. Right now, as of the 5 a.m. advisory, moving west-southwest, crawling 2 miles an hour, max sustained winds of 50 miles an hour. It's 170 miles northeast of Progreso, Mexico. Tropical storm warnings and watches are in place because Gamma is expected to continue moving in that direction, then kind of take a little loop around, become a depression by the middle of the week, and by Thursday and Friday, then it'll start to move more northward back into the Gulf of Mexico. And the reason for that is that we now have tropical depression number 26. It's 90 miles south of Jamaica and max sustained winds of 35 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 9 miles an hour. And could very well become a tropical storm as soon as later today, and then a hurricane potentially as we head into Wednesday morning, and then eventually could become a Category 2 before it moves towards the Gulf Coast here. So Louisiana, Mississippi, even portions of the Panhandle, Alabama will be on high alert and monitoring the progression of tropical depression number 26.
All right, Gamma lashes tropical resorts with strong winds as it slowly moves along the Mexican coastline. These winds ripped across the Yucatan Peninsula as heavy rain flooded communities over the weekend. Gamma made landfall Saturday morning in Tulum, Mexico as a high-end tropical storm. We're talking winds of 70 miles per hour. Moisture from the tropics, along with a stalled-out front over Florida, fueling the downpours that we'll continue to see across the state this week. And with more rain comes more problems. Drivers will see more of this, forcing their way through high water. Better yet, turn around, don't drown, right? This is in Kendall, Florida, located in the Miami area. About 5.5 feet of rain have fallen in Miami since the beginning of the year, so we're running about 15 inches above average. We begin, though, with Tropical Storm Delta, located about 130 miles to the south of Jamaica, as we take a live look at Negril on the western side of the island. And Alex, once the storm gets into the Gulf of Mexico, spending some time over warm water, we've got the chance for intensification into a hurricane.
And looking likely that that's going to take place here for us, becoming a hurricane as we head on through Tuesday to Wednesday, somewhere in that time frame. But right now, Tropical Storm Delta, 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm as of the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, moving at this point off to the west at 7 miles per hour. You can see the satellite presentation has gotten a little better organized here over the last, let's say, 24 hours or so. Now, the outer periphery impacting Jamaica with some of the downpours and gusty winds, but the core of the system should stay to the south and west as this thing begins to move off towards the west-northwest. At least that's in the forecast. So there's its location over those warm waters already at this point. We're talking temperatures in the mid to upper 80s. So plenty warm water for this thing to work with. And you'll notice how it develops here as we head on through time. There's your timestamp moving on through this afternoon. There's the center of the circulation. You can see some of the stronger winds here, according to the computer model, starting to really get going here as we get in towards tomorrow morning. The Cayman Islands starting to feel some of the impacts. Again, those tropical storm conditions there, and then continuing to strengthen a bit more. Looks like it's going to be splitting the uprights here between the Yucatan and western Cuba in terms of the core of the circulation, but still, no doubt the impacts will be felt. Western Cuba, where we do now have hurricane warnings that are in effect there. as we are expecting hurricane conditions to impact that area, and the tropical storm warnings are there for the Cayman Islands. That's the area where the tropical storm conditions are expected. Pretty good agreement on where this thing heads here as we head on through the next several days, moving west-northwest, going through the Yucatan Channel, and then up through the Gulf of Mexico. And you notice there's a turn towards the north and then eventually towards the north and the east. We are anticipating to deal with a bit of a trough coming in from the west, which will help to scoop this thing up and push it more north and northeastbound down the road. Forecast from the National Hurricane Center shows us what's going on. There's the gradual strengthening and the general location of where it'll be going. Now, remember, the cone where you're looking at, anywhere you see that red is where the center of the circulation could be. Could be on the left side, could be on the right side. So we really have to watch out here as we head towards Friday morning. Anywhere here in that red from essentially the Texas-Louisiana state line all the way over towards the Florida Panhandle, anywhere in that zone, we could be dealing with the center of the circulation. But of course, remember, impacts can be felt even outside of that. So paying attention along the U.S. Gulf Coast as we could be dealing with a Category 2 hurricane approaching late in our week.
East winds at about 15 miles per hour or so. We're at 87 where the sun is out and the humidity is high in Key West. Big story actually the tropics, and we are not too far removed from a lot of activity. That's Gamma near the Yucatan Peninsula, but more importantly that's Delta just to the south and southwest here of Jamaica. And we have certainly a system now that is ready to ramp up in its organization and intensity. I want to show you the stats first and foremost here on Delta. Now as a strong tropical storm, winds at 70 miles per hour, moving off to the west at 8, but then it's going to shift to the northwest, and now a new forecast track will carry the system closer to the Yucatan Peninsula. Remember, this weekend, Gamma making landfall here, and now unfortunately Delta heading in as well. Hurricane warnings are up towards the Cancun area here, maybe a major hurricane on our hands. As it moves into the Gulf waters, and it continues and then makes a bend, the northern Gulf Coast states unfortunately still in play late week. That's Delta. Now, further off to the south here is Gamma. And Gamma now, tropical depression still meandering out ahead of Delta. That won't be a player, but the bottom line is the activity continues. Delta, our 25th named storm of the season, and soon likely to be our 9th hurricane. Busy indeed.
This is going to be a long and dangerous week as we get ready for the landfall of a hurricane in all likelihood on the northern Gulf Coast by the end of this week. How strong will it be? Exactly where it will make landfall? We don't know those details yet, but we know that Delta, which is now a hurricane as of the 8 p.m. Eastern Time intermediate public advisory from the Hurricane Center, poses a significant and unique threat to the northern Gulf Coast. I know you've had a lot of storms this year, but this one could do something that other storms haven't, and you could end up getting wind, water, or both worse than you did in some of those previous storms. So we got to get ready. So let's break down the timing and where it's going and what the intensity is going to be, at least within the bounds of the uncertainty that we have to deal with. Max winds at 75, the pressure all the way down to 980 millibars. That pressure is really going down pretty quickly, and we are expecting rapid intensification over the next 24 hours. This is expected to be a major hurricane by tomorrow night or early Wednesday as it goes near or over northeast Yucatan. So Cancun, Cozumel, those areas could get the direct impacts from a major hurricane late tomorrow night into early Wednesday. That's where hurricane warnings are in effect, in addition to the western portions of Cuba in Pinar del Rio. Now, what about hurricane warnings or watches for the northern Gulf Coast? They're not up yet. Landfall of the center of circulation will be somewhere in the northern Gulf Coast sometime, maybe late Friday. Hard to pinpoint that, and a lot of you are at risk for that. But the weather will go downhill before that time, and it's possible that winds of tropical storm force could start arriving on portions of the northern Gulf Coast as soon as Thursday night. And so that means 2 days before that, maybe late tomorrow night or early Wednesday, hurricane watches and storm surge watches could go up for a portion of the northern Gulf Coast. And so that means we got tonight, we got Tuesday and Wednesday for sure, and then probably most or all of Thursday to get ready. So there is time to prepare, to get your supplies, find out your evacuation zone, and get ready to deal with a significant hurricane. Chances of hurricane force winds are greatest there in southern Louisiana, but we can't tell you which of those areas is most likely. You're all at risk, and tropical storm conditions are a significant risk over a large portion over the northern Gulf Coast. So here is the hurricane here in the Caribbean. big upper level high pressure, very warm water. This is getting into the Gulf, and it is going to be a significant threat. So you're going to want to stay with us all week long here on Weather Underground. We thank you so much for watching us here tonight. We hope you're back with us tomorrow. And remember, together, we know more.
It's time now for your tropical update. We are tracking Delta, which could take aim at the Gulf Coast.
Let's get to our chief certified meteorologist, Betty Davis, with the details. Betty.
Good evening. Well, first, parts of the northeast Yucatan Peninsula will have to deal with Hurricane Delta. It is strengthening over the Caribbean Sea. The new advisory showing it has maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour, pressure at 977 millibars as it moves west-northwest at 7 miles per hour. The center of circulation about 170 miles southwest of Negril, Jamaica, and you can see that deep convection, all that thunderstorm activity right at the core of this hurricane. Forecast to come near the Yucatan Peninsula or move over it as a Category 3 hurricane, a major hurricane. Then it gets into the Gulf of Mexico later on this week, approaches the northern Gulf Coast of the U.S. It looks like Friday morning, and it could be a Category 2 at that time. Either way, a formidable system they'll have to ready for later this week.
Downtown Miami, 85, the warm spot Key West, inland areas into the low 80s, 82 Hialeah, West Kendall, 83 in Homestead with a nice a strong beach breeze anywhere between 10 to 16 miles per hour. So here's the latest on Delta. Rapidly intensifying to a Cat 2 hurricane as of 5 a.m. 100-mile-per-hour winds. It is moving west-northwest at 15 at a pretty fast pace and located over 400 miles east-southeast of Cozumel, Mexico. And based on the forecast track, it's going to be an extremely dangerous hurricane as it moves through the northeastern Yucatan Peninsula early Wednesday, and it'll be a major hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico moving on into Thursday. Now, it looks like the forecast track has been nudged more towards the west, so that turn to the northeast is going to happen a little bit later. So it will approach parts of the Gulf Coast states eventually late week into the upcoming weekend. By Saturday, a Category 2 hurricane potentially moving across Louisiana. Advisories have been extended, especially for the Yucatan Peninsula, and we're talking about hurricane warnings that are in effect. So Gamma's done as of last night. We're going to be paying close attention to Delta, and a lot of you are wondering, are we going to see any wind, rain out of Delta? Well, the answer is yes, but as we move on into the weekend, it looks like this tail of moisture could increase our rain chances heading into Saturday and potentially Sunday. But at least through Thursday and Friday, we'll be on the drier side of things. And then here is Delta and making its way into the northern Gulf Coast states.
And this morning, a growing threat in the Western Caribbean. Delta undergoing rapid intensification overnight, strengthening into a Category 2. And I've got to tell you, there is literally nothing to stop this system from gaining even more strength. Delta is expected to become the third major hurricane of the season. Welcome into AMHQ on this Tuesday morning. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jim Cantor and Jen Carfagno. We're going to break down every angle to this dangerous hurricane as it eyes the Gulf Coast. Here is the very latest forecast cone. It's expected to make landfall near Cancun sometime tomorrow, potentially as a major hurricane. And then it's going to sweep its way over towards, more of the western Gulf of Mexico. When it does get over here, there's going to be a trough that is going to help direct it back towards perhaps Louisiana, Alabama. We're going to keep a very close eye on this and, of course, break down everything that will be pushing and pulling the storm and directing this path that you are seeing. So, Jim, let's first get the very latest data and information on this storm.
Yeah, so the 8 a.m.'s out, intermediate advisories out. Hurricane hunters just made a pass, saw the pressure go down 962 millibars. So remember when we left you, it was 968 before the plane came in, and now it's down to 962. This is not surprising. It's still undergoing intensification here, and it may even go lower than that. It's a mile from Cat 3. A mile per hour. Okay, so you've got a high-end Cat 2 at 110 miles per hour here, 370 miles to the east, southeast of Cozumel, moving west-northwest at 15. Again, keep an eye on us this morning, guys. There's so much convection around the center right now that the cirrus canopy is coming up and out. So it's blocking the eye. You can't even see the eye. And that's actually a sign of rapid intensification. Once that process starts to conclude a little bit, you'll actually see a nice eye coming out of this thing. But that eye is just that formidable feature where you've got the sinking motion around what is incredible power in what we call the CDO or the eye wall in this case. So there's the plane going in there, leaving Lakeland. And last night they did a lot of high altitude aircraft surveillance, so they looked at the atmosphere, what it's coming into, and things like that. Give us a better idea of certainly, how, the atmosphere is going to behave potentially over time, what this could be certainly as a strength perspective, and all that is added to some of these dynamic and statistical models as we go out in time. So winds are right on par here to what we got. Went up again, as we mentioned, 110 miles per hour. Pressure down, obviously, as they kind of move to the south of the storm. So for all intents and purposes, we have a Category 4 hurricane heading toward Cancun. All right, it's Cat 2 now, still intensifying, expected to be Cat 4 at 130 miles an hour, maybe weaken a little bit across the Yucatan, which is what they do, then bring it back up to 130. And that is from the point where we start to take it down. We do think it is going to decrease in intensity as it moves to the north, but still, dealing with a Cat 2 landfall hurricane is no fun. Is that going to be somewhere just east of Lake Charles? Is it going to be on the Mississippi coast, maybe even Alabama? Or is it going to be somewhere in the middle, which of course has the highest probabilities right now? But again, remember, those track forecasts out 4 days usually have an error of about 150 miles. So that's going to be a big difference, obviously, in which side it goes toward New Orleans. But hurricane force winds and a bona fide hurricane with storm surge definitely heading toward the northern Gulf Coast once again, Jen. Once again,
6th time this season that New Orleans has been in that cone. Now let's go down to Cancun, Mexico. You are under a hurricane warning. The city bracing for Delta to make landfall midweek, and it could be the strongest storm to make landfall here since Wilma back in 2005. And this after Gamma just came ashore over the weekend. We had rainfall drenching the area, over a foot of rain actually in some spots of the Yucatan.
And we want to continue to bring you the updates on Hurricane Delta. If you're just joining us, it is now a Category 3 major hurricane. The latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the 11 a.m. advisory, now has the winds at 115 miles per hour, central pressure at 955, and moving actually pretty quickly, west-northwesterly now at 16 miles per hour. So there it is there, and you can see how it is further strengthened and organized here, in fact, rapidly intensified. I mean, this thing really got going over the last 24 hours or so. All right, let's take a look at the cone. Of course, what does that mean? The National Hurricane Center issues this with their advisories, and it really comes down to forecasters interpreting the models and eventually predicting the most probable location of where the center is going to be. So that's essentially where the center of the cone is. They pinpoint those dots and they go up about 5 days in time and also assign intensities for each of those periods. So that's how we get the intensity values. But then that's not it. You actually draw circles around those points, and those circles essentially account for historical errors, and those historical errors go back about 5 years in time to figure out exactly where this thing may be headed. Could be east, could be west, anywhere on either side of that particular point it may happen. And of course, the farther out in time, the greater that distance is going to be. So in the near term, there's a little bit more confidence, less error, but as you head out in time, we certainly deal with that. Could be talking 225 miles away from the center on either point of that area. So when we talk about the cone itself, there's your system where that center point is. Now, it doesn't have to stay in that cone. In fact, it only happens about 2/3 of the time. 1/3 of the time, you can end up with a system outside of the cone. And one very important factor is the fact that this does not show us how big the system or small the system is going to be, and it doesn't show us exactly who may be impacted even outside of the cone. All very important things, Kelly.
And I know a lot of people are cone weary at this point, Alex, especially along the Gulf Coast. We've had so many impacts with previous tropical systems. Check out these aerial images showing the aftermath of Hurricane Sally. Remember this one? It hit the Gulf Shores, Alabama area last month. And now we've got Hurricane Delta approaching the Gulf Coast. So can the saturated soil, take any more tropical rainfall? So we're going to talk about the fact that we're above average when it comes to rainfall. And by the way, we just got an update on Delta. I believe now Category 4, 130 mile per hour winds. We'll have to get some confirmation on that, but I am seeing an update from the National Hurricane Center. They may have adjusted that last advisory. to 130-mile-per-hour winds. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I know that we definitely have a major hurricane moving up into the Gulf of Mexico. And look at all the landfalls we've seen with previous storms along the Gulf Coast. Okay, we do have breaking news now. It is a Category 4 now. Boy, what a jump we just saw happen. So at the 11 o'clock advisory, we knew the hurricane hunters were investigating it. They were saying, okay, major hurricane with 115-mile-per-hour winds, but now it's even stronger than that. They just upped it another 15 mile per hour. So now it's up to 130, making it a Category 4 hurricane. So this is breaking news. Already a Category 4 over the very warm water of the Western Caribbean. So again, hopefully those in Cancun and Cozumel, anywhere along the Yucatan, is preparing for this very dangerous storm to hit later tonight into tomorrow. And you can see what the cone does with this now, keeping it at a very strong strength as we head towards Thursday evening, 130. Again, 130 and up, we've got Category 4. And then above that, you've got Category 5. I believe Category 5 starts at about 156 or so. So as it approaches the Gulf Coast, there will be some weakening as it encounters both some shear, but also some cooler sea surface temperatures right along the Louisiana coastline. So that's really our saving grace. We don't think it's going to be intensifying upon approach. However, those winds right now are expected to be at least 120, maybe 125, making a landfall sometime Friday night into Saturday morning. So again, all concerns along the Gulf Coast, we definitely need to be ready for this. And the fact that we've already had so many tropical systems, 2020, we've got saturated soil out here.
Breaking right now on the Weather Channel, the National Hurricane Center update is in, and Hurricane Delta still a Category 4, but by 10 miles an hour stronger, a 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane that is eventually going to be making its way to the United States. Whether or not it stays as a 4 is not likely by the time it reaches the shores of the United States. However, other areas may be seeing that force, Jackie, including parts of Mexico.
Yeah, and also places like Biloxi, Mississippi, New Orleans, Louisiana need to pay very close attention and get prepared if you're not right now. We've got all the rest of today, we've got all of tomorrow, and we have all of Thursday before we could be facing hurricane landfall. And be prepared for a major hurricane. This thing has been intensifying so rapidly today, Chris, we couldn't rule out a Category 5 at this point.
No, and even yesterday, the forecast was for it to possibly get to a 2, maybe a high-end 2, a 110, I believe, was the forecast at its peak yesterday. So nothing now, I think, would surprise us in terms of how strong this potentially could get, just based on its history over the past 24 hours. 140 miles an hour, Category 4 hurricane. Again, yesterday, the peak intensity was expected to be 110, but a couple days from now, frankly. So this has, which was another thing we thought could happen. We did see that it was well within reasonable expectations that this was going to rapidly intensify, but to intensify this much and so fast is almost mind-boggling here. And just looking at the history here. So from yesterday, it was a tropical storm, not becoming a hurricane until 5 o'clock. And then, again, where we are now, it wasn't even a hurricane at this time yesterday. It was still a tropical storm, but now it has essentially doubled in strength with the maximum sustained winds now at 140 miles an hour. One thing that we're looking at is the size. So when you see it on satellite, you look at this storm, and what you'll see is a huge area. But within that area is where the winds are actually hurricane force, a much smaller area, about 25 miles from the center. And tropical storm force winds over a much larger area, but about 90 miles from the center. So what you hope is that this bit right here just flat out misses Mexico. It does not look like that's the most reasonable expectation with this, but that's what we're hoping for. Now, one downside of that, too, will eventually be the fact that it won't have much weakening likely based on just the land. Now, the atmospheric conditions around it, that's something else. But just knowing that any system that goes over land tends to weaken, the fact that it stays, if it stays over water longer, could mean that it's going to stay a little bit stronger, a little bit longer. But you don't want a
a Category 4 or 5 making landfall anywhere, frankly. And unfortunately, right now, this is a big storm we're looking at with not a lot of wind shear around it. So the wind shear, when it's the winds are essentially erratic, right? So they're going different speeds or different directions at different levels of the atmosphere. Hurricanes don't thrive in those environments. They thrive in essentially what are like calm environments, and which is ironic, I think, because of how violent they are. But when the winds around them are strong or going in different directions, they can tear these storms apart. But right now, Jackie, when you look at this, and frankly, where it is right now in the Caribbean, there's not much working against it at the moment, which is not a good thing.
Our Skycast model painting that picture for us tonight with the possibility for some of those passing showers coming through from time to time. Meantime, we do have the new advisory already in on Hurricane Delta churning over the Caribbean Sea. Winds now of 145 miles per hour. Earlier, we were at 140. So this is moving full steam ahead. Pressure still holding at 956 millibars, moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour. This is the visible satellite imagery, so it's showing us the clouds, and you look really, really closely and try to really get a feel for the cloud texture, and it looks as though we've got a rain band pushing in around Cozumel already. So they're getting ready for hurricane conditions there and along portions of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is forecast to be a powerhouse of a hurricane as it moves over that area, crosses over into the Gulf of Mexico. And yes, this projected path still does bring it toward the north central Gulf Coast of the U.S. as we're winding down the week. So Louisiana, already, certainly you can see, is in this projected path, so they're getting ready for this one. And oh, by the way, so far this season, the Gulf Coast has had 6 landfalls. Remember Cristobal? That was kind of difficult to pronounce. Remember that one? That was just one, and Hurricane Hannah and Hurricane Laura. Thankfully, we do not have to worry about this system here in South Florida. We have drier air that's going to move in and knock our rain chance down for 2 or 3 days.
From your happy preteen years to just being a terror as a teenager, or going from 1 to the terrible 2s, right? That's what we've seen with this storm within the last 24 hours.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah. But I get your point. Yeah, this thing has gone berserk today, that's for sure. Alex Wilson, Mike Bettis with you. Special extended coverage for you. We'll be with you till 9 o'clock. We'll have live coverage till midnight tonight to keep you updated on Hurricane Delta. The hurricane hunters are out there right now, keeping us informed of what's happening. So we've got an ongoing upper level flight. We've got a P3 that's en route. They've just basically gotten there now. And then tomorrow we'll have another low level NOAA flight. Then we'll have constant Air Force flights as well. So let's show you the flight that most recently took off from Lakeland. They're about to make a turn and cut through the center of the hurricane. Let's get some more details with our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knapp. These missions so critical, Dr. Knapp, the low-level flights that give us the real-time data of what the hurricane is doing, then these upper-level missions that fly around the extremities of the hurricane that allow us to forecast its future path.
Yeah, now the NOAA plane that's going into the center of Hurricane Delta right now is at about 10,000 feet. Now, when they fly into full-blown hurricanes, they don't fly as low as they would for a tropical storm, and certainly not as low as they would for an INVEST mission for safety reasons. But at 10,000 feet, they can get a pretty good idea of what's going on and reduce that data down to the surface. They're just now getting into the tropical storm force winds, and I'll show you where that is in just a little bit. We're going to get a new advisory from the Hurricane Center within the half hour with the benefit of that Hurricane Hunter data as they go through. What the specialist is doing at the Hurricane Center right now is looking through the aircraft data, and then he's going to get the public advisory mostly written, and then look at the aircraft data one more time, finalize the numbers, and send out the advisory. It's one of the more fast-paced 30 minutes that you have as a hurricane specialist during the next 30 minutes from now, with aircraft data coming in before advisory time. So you can see how it's just now getting to where it's detecting winds of tropical storm force as it comes in from the northwest, but you can see it's not all that far from the center. This is not a large system right now. It's very compact, and we'll have to see how wide the eye is on this penetration of the storm, because it was only about 5 miles across during the previous aircraft mission. These small systems can go up and down in a hurry. This one has done nothing but go up for the last 24 hours, and we don't yet have any indication that that small eye is about to fall apart, as they sometimes do with an eyeball replacement cycle. If this small eye holds together, it could continue to strengthen all the way up to landfall in northeast Yucatan tomorrow morning, and that's obviously bad news. Now, if it stays small, maybe we limit the area of damage and can get that to be in the less populated areas if at all possible. The last few visible images of the day on the high-res GOES imagery, you don't make out the eye. You just see the bubbling of the convection. It's such a small system that we can't make out the eye. You see a little dimple on the infrared there once in a while, but oh my gosh, these cloud tops are so tall, so cold, just extremely vigorous convection. And with the small size of the system going over land, there will be some weakening, but eventually there will be a structural change, we think, and it'll become a larger system. Then we've got a large Cat 3 or 4 going northward in the Gulf of Mexico. And when you look at how large the system is forecast to be by the European model, this is not good news, Alex, because the larger systems, bigger storm surge producers, bigger rainmakers, more wind for more people.
And what that means is that emergency managers right now are basically in their war rooms, right? They're in their areas with all of the players talking right now about what they have to do as early as tomorrow for the most vulnerable populations in their cities. Because, Carl, it takes a long time to get people out of the way of these storms. And with a growing storm, right, in size anyway, in the central Gulf of Mexico, there's going to be a lot of cities that have these conversations tonight into tomorrow morning.
Yeah, no question about that. And, you know, it is worrisome that the storm is going to be out over the Gulf with a lot of warm water and with very light winds aloft. And so it's going to have opportunity to get stronger. And certainly we've seen this sort of overperformance of storms in recent years. And so here's the latest from the Hurricane Center. It's now a Category 4 storm with winds of 130 miles per hour, now moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. Hurricane hunters have been out in the storm for the last few hours, and generally the max winds that they've found have been on the order of Category 2. So they did drop the winds with the 11 o'clock advisory from 145 to 130. They didn't want to move too far in any one direction because it is a small storm. And even though it may be weakening some right now, it could ramp up. And so you don't want to say, okay, well, it's just Category 2 and then have a Category 4 blasting into Cancun in the morning, which certainly is possible. It's possible that it's going to be a very strong storm, but I'd say it's also possible that it is not as strong. So let's, just see how it goes overnight tonight. But no matter what the case, you're looking at a very dangerous storm coming into Cancun and Cozumel tonight. Let's hope that it's going to continue to be on a sort of weakening trend, but there's no guarantee of that, and we could very well be looking at a high-end storm coming in early tomorrow morning, and perhaps the worst storm that we've seen in 15 years in those areas. It's already been a devastating year in Cancun and Cozumel because of what's happened to tourism and the pandemic. And now you've got this on top of that. And the storm, as I mentioned, coming in tomorrow morning. It's going to be overnight in Cozumel and then more towards sunup in Cancun. And then beyond that, moving out into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, here's the latest forecast track and intensities from the Hurricane Center. And so they're looking for it to be a Category 4 storm as it moves out into the Western Gulf. Again, very little to impede it during that time when it's out over the open water. At the very last minute, the wind shear is going to increase and there's going to be a reduction in the amount of warmth in the water in the Gulf of Mexico. And so we may see a drop off in intensity, but if it's starting at Category 4 and it drops back to Category 3, that is still an incredibly powerful and dangerous storm. And right now it appears that Louisiana is the most likely area for landfall. Whether that's more towards the western part of the state, and gosh, we hope not. We really hope not, given that Lake Charles has been through so much already, or whether that is the eastern part of the state, New Orleans. It's a little too early to say at this time, but we do think it's going to be a large circulation, and with that, we expect to see significant storm surge, significant wind impacts, very heavy rain as well as the storm moves in. And here you see the probability of tropical storm force winds as it stands right now, really directed on the central part of Louisiana. We'll have much more on the storm coming up here in just a few minutes.
We are tracking Hurricane Delta. This system, a massive, powerful system, really strengthened in such a limited amount of time. It is making a beeline to the Yucatan Peninsula, Cozumel, about 35 miles east-northeast. This forecast has already deteriorated, not just for Cozumel, but Cancun. The forecast cone has the system moving over Cancun later this morning into the afternoon hours. We're talking tropical storm force winds extending out from the center 103 miles. Hurricane force winds already being felt because the system's only 30 miles away from Cozumel. The hurricane force winds extend out from the center 80 miles. Therefore, they have that hurricane warning in effect. Hurricane force winds and rain is going to devastate parts of the Yucatan right over Cancun later this morning into the afternoon hours before the system makes a beeline to the Gulf Coast states. As of 5 a.m., winds of 115 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 17. All more in our local forecast, because the further away Delta gets, the better our weather pattern will be.
Sitting about 60 miles inland from Louisiana's Gulf Coast, but wind, rain, flooding, all can have major consequences for the state's capital city. Delta's precise track will determine whether Baton Rouge gets swamped by 5 to 8 inches of rain or perhaps escapes with fewer than 3. There are local newspaper reports that the LSU home game on Saturday could be flipped and played at Missouri instead. Let's talk rainfall. Models are a little bit different in their tracks. They're very consistent, but enough differences to show you here that if you follow the Euro model, it's more of a track that brings heavy rain into eastern Texas. And then over into western Louisiana, the American model, the GFS, is just a little bit to the east, and that would put that heaviest of rainfall from Lake Charles up through Baton Rouge and Lafayette. You would be right in that as well. New Orleans, right now, your forecast is for about an inch or two of rain, with the heavier rain being more associated with the track of the storm. But know that since the storm is going to expand in size, so will its rainfall footprint. So don't think what's happening right now down there in the Yucatan will be the same thing that we will see. It will be a bigger system. And that's what I want to talk about as we go down to Miami and the National Hurricane Center and talk with Director Ken Graham. Ken, good morning again. Let's talk about this increase in size that we are expecting once it reaches the Gulf of Mexico and the importance of realizing that and how the impacts are going to expand as well.
Yeah, Jen, the size is so important in these things because, you know, it started off as a pretty small storm and then had, you know, started to see some influences, the winds coming down. But the important thing here is the size. So once we start getting off the Yucatan Peninsula, we're going to see what we have. A lot of times what we've seen historically is a bigger storm. So when they start to strengthen, they start to get stronger as we move over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, they start to get larger. The larger the storm, the larger the wind field, and a huge influence on storm surge. Even without having the winds, a larger storm will produce that storm surge. So that's what we got to remember. It's not just necessarily the wind here, but a larger storm, that's a lot of water as well.
Now let's talk about the storm surge because, you know, if we see a strong Cat 4 hurricane out over the Gulf of Mexico, it's generating those waves, that water level rise and the storm surge. Even if the storm is weakening as it comes towards land, will we still see that same sort of magnitude of storm surge?
Yeah, Jen, it's so important to keep stressing this because you'll see fluctuations in those winds. I mean, we've been talking about, you know, some cooler waters, maybe some shear just close to the coastline, but that's not what we need to concentrate on because even if you see some of those fluctuations in the wind, we're still a strong storm. So you still got those winds, and because it's a large storm, that means it's going to overcome whatever those fluctuations in the wind. So because of the size, you're going to get increased storm surge, and the other part here, it speeds up. So when it goes faster, you'll start seeing some of those hurricane force winds stretch not just on the coast, but even further inland.
All right, Ken Graham, Director of the National Hurricane Center, thank you again for your expertise and perspective this morning. We'll be checking back in with him throughout the day. There's a lot to follow. We are going to watch Delta move from overland right now to over the Gulf of Mexico this afternoon, and that is going to allow it to re-strengthen. So a lot will change and happen in the next 24 hours.
And time now for your first alert weather forecast. We are tracking this right here is Hurricane Delta. Delta came ashore right near Cancun, Mexico early this morning, right around 6:30 in the morning. It is weakening now that it's on land. Right now it's a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 105 miles an hour. Yesterday it was a very strong Category 4 hurricane. Now, as it works its way into the Gulf of Mexico, there's very little wind shear, very warm water, so it is expected to intensify back up to a major hurricane, a Category 3 hurricane. Then it's going to start to turn towards the north and then eventually the northeast, making a push towards coastal Louisiana, somewhere very close to the Texas-Louisiana border as we head into the second half of Friday. Coming ashore is a major hurricane with winds of roughly 120 miles an hour, easily a foot of rain or more with this system, and then it quickly starts to move on in. It is going to stay well to the west of us, and for us, we're actually going to see some pretty comfortable weather as we head into the next several days. Very little rainfall around, lots of sunshine, but temperatures right around 90.
Good afternoon. I'm Tiffany Kenny.
And I'm Erin Guy. Thank you for joining us for WPBF 25 News at noon. We're going to have that story in just a moment, but we want to start with Delta. It made landfall in Mexico earlier this morning as a Category 2 hurricane. You can see from this video right here the strong winds, heavy rains coming with this nasty storm. It's also bringing with it a possible life-threatening storm surge. First warning meteorologist Vanessa Vanette tracking where Hurricane Delta is heading next. Vanessa?
And Erin, it is going to be heading towards the Gulf Coast actually on Friday into Saturday near Louisiana as a Category 3 hurricane. So right now, as of the 11 o'clock advisory, it is moving towards the northwest at 17 miles per hour and sustained winds of 105 miles per hour. So it didn't make landfall as a Category 2 hurricane with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. So it was a very strong hurricane, and now it will exit out Mexico and into the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and then it will re-intensify into a Category 3 hurricane on Thursday into Friday, and then approaching Louisiana and parts of Texas as well on Friday night, and it will weaken into a Category 1 hurricane. So again, this is something to watch for the Gulf Coast states on Friday and into Saturday.
Stand by for just a second because I want to talk to you more about intensity changes, but first we want to share with you some new video, as this is what it looked and sounded like as Delta made landfall on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. This is Playa del Carmen. Strong winds and rain hit the popular tourist destination. Delta had weakened to a high-end Category 2 hurricane by the time it made landfall in Mexico. Its eye has been very small as well, and you get somewhat of an idea of that from this video from hurricane hunters as they flew through Delta. More missions are set for today. In fact, they're back in the storm as we speak as it pushes into the Gulf of Mexico. So, Carl, let's go back into this conversation. Hurricane hunters are going to be getting, a better fix to see how this is emerging and just how strong it might be right now. But we've already seen a lot of changes in intensity. We had the rapid intensification that took place yesterday, much faster, I think, than a lot of people anticipated, but it also started to weaken before a landfall more than we anticipated.
Yeah, it had a very small core. It had what we call a pinhole eye that was only 4 miles across. And when you've got a really small core like that, a storm can ramp up really quickly, get a lot stronger in a short period of time, and it can also drop down very quickly when conditions are less than optimal. And that's exactly what happened last night. You look at the satellite loop here as the storm was approaching. We never did see a cleared out eye, even though the storm was at Category 4 intensity earlier in the evening. Now, by late in the evening, they dropped the intensity from 145 to 130. They actually did not find winds stronger than 107 miles per hour as the hurricane hunters were in there just prior to the 11 o'clock advisory. So, they could have actually dropped it to Category 2. But of course, Jackie, that presents a messaging problem, because if you drop it way back based on this plane data, and then it suddenly gets much stronger overnight, and it's coming in as perhaps a 150 mile per hour storm. Well, that's not good either.
Yeah.
So it really does put them in a bit of a position that way. But thankfully, that weakening trend did continue, so it wasn't anywhere near Category 4 intensity as it came in this morning.
Yeah, I always feel like better to prepare for the worst and hope that it comes in a little bit weaker.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about intensity of what we can expect forward, because now we're back over the Gulf of Mexico. We've got all tonight. We've got all day tomorrow to feed off that warm energy and fuel from the Gulf.
Yes, exactly right. There's a lot of warm water out there, so that's a big part of what we look at. The other part is what's going on with the upper level wind environment. So this very small core was bothered by this stronger wind, which you see right in there. That's easterly wind coming in and shearing the system, somewhat restricting the outflow, as we say. As it moves off to the northwest, it's going to get into this bubble. It's going to get into this area where the winds will be lighter aloft, and that is going to last until it gets to the coast there, until it gets to Louisiana. So, Jackie, I do think we're going to be looking at optimal conditions for strengthening over the next day or so as it's approaching, up until the point where it's approaching. So, certainly we could be looking at a much, much stronger storm.
All right. Thanks so much, Carl.
Hurricane Delta storming ashore in Mexico, dumping heavy rain across the Yucatan Peninsula.
Trees topple, causing power problems for thousands in parts of Cancun and Cozumel. We are tracking Hurricane Delta after the system caused just a mess in Mexico.
Now people along the Gulf Coast, particularly in storm-weary Louisiana, are on alert. 7's Robin Simmons is in the Plex with more on this. Robin?
Hard to believe, but this is the 6th time this hurricane season Louisiana has been in the forecast cone. And the fact that life is already upended for many due to the pandemic, some officials are worrying it is an absolute recipe for disaster, people not taking storm advisories seriously. Hurricane Delta making landfall as a Category 2 storm around 5:30 in the morning Wednesday just south of Cancun. Sustained winds of 110 miles per hour according to the National Hurricane Center. Trees knocked down, power knocked out in parts of the resort towns of Cancun and Cozumel. Before the storm, Mexico's famous beaches on the Yucatan Peninsula empty, stores filled with people gathering supplies. About 39,000 people evacuated, tourists like Blake Greer cutting their trips short.
Our flight was actually tomorrow, so we changed it to today to get out of here. Yeah, we caught a flight to Mexico City, and we're going to fly home tomorrow.
Delta, the 25th named storm of the 2020 season. It already moved through the Caribbean yesterday as a Category 4, hitting parts of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Officials in Louisiana expressing concern that some people may be exhausted from so many hurricanes and ignore any warnings or advice.
One of the things that keeps me up at night is the folks that I know that are not going to listen to your local officials. It's for your safety. These storms can be unpredictable and dangerous, and we just want to make sure everyone's safe.
The latest forecast will have Hurricane Delta strengthening from what it is now, making landfall in Louisiana as a Category 3 on Friday. Live in the Newsplex, Robin Simmons, 7 News.
Well, as Robin mentioned, the concern now shifts to the Gulf Coast states as Delta begins that move north. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow has the latest thinking on the projected path. Phil.
Well, let's begin where it has been. It made landfall early this morning across the northeastern edge there of the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2, 110-mile-per-hour winds. It has now moved into the Gulf of Mexico, and it has weakened. A recon plane went in and found only 85-mile-an-hour winds. Moving northwest at 17, now being tracked out of Progreso in Mexico. It will travel over a river of hot water there in the Gulf of Mexico, and that will give it a chance to regain some strength. It could be back up to a Category 3 Friday with 115-mile-per-hour winds. But then as it approaches the coastal waters there of Louisiana, much cooler waters, and we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed, that it will weaken even further before it makes landfall. Here are the advisories that are in place. Everything in yellow is a hurricane watch. Everything in blue, a tropical storm watch. They are also looking at a storm surge watch from basically eastern Texas there, all the way through Morgan City, Louisiana, New Orleans, in through Biloxi, Mississippi, and Mobile, Alabama. They are expecting about 11 feet of water coming on shore, and also plenty of heavy rain wherever it comes on shore, 7 to up to 12 inches. That will surely lead to the worry of more flooding. We'll have the very latest on this and our local forecast a little bit later on in weather.
First Alert meteorologist Steve Weigel is tracking Delta as it is now taking aim at the United States Gulf Coast. Steve?
Yes, it is, and it is going to make a landfall on Friday afternoon. Of course, Cancun and Cozumel, no stranger to strong hurricanes. This was one of the weaker ones, considering Wilma made landfall there back in 2005, and Gilbert, which Michael covered there back several decades ago. That had 160-mile-an-hour winds. This one has weakened quite a bit. Winds are 85, but this is still a well-structured storm now, moving up over open water again, very warm water and low wind shear. There's just nothing to stop this from gaining strength again into a major hurricane. That's the official forecast. There is the previous track this morning, making landfall just south of Cancun, roughly around sunrise, and then working into the Gulf of Mexico, continuing to strengthen. Briefly a Category 3 down to a 2 just before landfall, 105-mile-an-hour winds Friday afternoon, and then obviously weakening after that, but a big rainmaker all the way into the southeast and the mid-Atlantic on Saturday and Sunday. The model tracks guidance, and they have been very good guidance with this storm. Haven't wavered much through the last few days, and expected to track toward Louisiana and the Texas coastline.
All right, we're still awaiting the 7 o'clock Central Time advisory from the Hurricane Center. I think they're waiting right up to the last minute to get some more data from the hurricane hunters that are in there right now. But we're going to show you the track here, which pushes it off to the north and west here over the next day, taking a turn to the north and eventually a turn to the northeast. northeast, and looks like a potential landfall in Louisiana. But by tomorrow, we could be right back to a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane. We currently sit at 85, a Category 1 hurricane. So that's a look at the future track. There, a look at the hurricane watches that are in effect. Eventually, these will be upgraded to warnings. Likely that'll happen tomorrow morning. But hurricane watches extend right over into Texas as well. That'll include the Beaumont, Port Arthur area. But you can see that now we're starting to get another little blow-up of convection or thunderstorm activity near the center here. And the hurricane hunters are trying to make passes through this. And I see a little bit of blow-up right in there. Look at that. And so nighttime or nocturnal convection oftentimes is what you see, and storms can intensify overnight. Been fighting off dry air on the west side and on the east side. And so that's not a hindrance whatsoever at this point. We're getting away from the friction and interaction with land. We're still going over warm sea surface temperatures. We're now working our way into a very low wind shear environment. So all of those things work in favor of intensification. All right, so here's what the hurricane hunters have found so far. This little blip right here, and this is the wind speeds on the left side of your screen. This little blip right here is in the northeast quadrant when the plane flew right through there. And then it went through the eye down here. Then it went through the southwest portion of the thunderstorm down on this side. So that was its latest observation. And then they send data in packets. So likely we'll get some data here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. This is why you see the flat line there. But I think what they're looking for is what's happening there on the northwest side. And we do now have that new advisory. I don't know if I actually have the graphic to show you or not. I don't know if it's updated or not. Let me see if it is right there. 90-mile-per-hour hurricane force. So it did tick it up just a little bit. Winds were 85, went up to 90. Northwest movement is still the same, and pressure's dropped a couple of millibars here. It was 977. It's now at 973. So again, I think the likely scenario to happen overnight tonight, and now maybe all the way up through landfall even, is intensification, because we've got everything working for us at this point. So I don't think there's any hindrance at this point for this thing to do anything but intensify. Was talking about the warm sea surface temperatures. Now we had 90-degree water temperatures down here in the Caribbean when this thing rapidly intensified up to 145 miles per hour. The sea surface temperatures aren't as warm in the Gulf of Mexico, but still plenty warm, all right? And ocean heat content, maybe not as much as there was in the Caribbean, but still plenty, all right? So there's nothing really to slow it down as far as becoming an intense hurricane once again. So everything is working for it. The wind shear way up here to the north and west of it. Light winds aloft, so this thing is going to take off here. You might encounter a little bit of wind shear closer to landfall, but overall, Alex, what we're seeing in the atmosphere, what we're seeing at the surface means an intensifying hurricane. We could go right back to a major hurricane, a Category 3 or higher, at this time tomorrow.
We continue tracking Hurricane Delta in Louisiana under a state of emergency, bracing for landfall likely on Friday. About 60,000 people along the Gulf are getting ordered out. The hurricane hit Mexico first, though the damage is not as bad as many feared. In Cancun tonight, there are many fallen trees and broken windows, but no reports of deaths or injuries. The 11 o'clock advisory on the hurricane is out. Let's check in with Craig Setzer. Craig?
Elliot, the good news last night was that we had a weakening delta coming on to shore there in the northeast Yucatan Peninsula. Unfortunately, tonight we have a strengthening hurricane delta. Winds are up now at 90 miles an hour. The pressure has started to fall, and it's moving to the west-northwest at 17. It's a little bit of a lopsided storm this evening. Most of the strong winds, tropical storm conditions, northwest through northeast through southeast. The southwest side doesn't have as much storminess with it. Hurricane warnings now up for much of the Louisiana coast. There are tropical storm warnings bordering that, and storm surge warnings as well for significant storm surge. Now, this is going to come across an area that's already saw a hurricane this year, Hurricane Laura, which was Category 4 as it reached the coast there south of Lake Charles. That was late in August, right before we got into September. And unfortunately, that is going to be the case. Folks that have already dealt with the hurricane look like they're going to deal with another one. Very, very strong confidence in the models. This is going to be the track, and you can see Category 3 here. This is Friday morning. That's Friday evening, making landfall, reaching the coast there, and then weakening as it goes to the north. So certainly not a good situation there for folks that are still trying to recover. Here's the way it looks tonight. You can see it's looking a little bit more impressive on satellite. Big circulation. The center and the core is getting a little bit better organized. Thankfully, it is not going to bother us, and there are no tropical threats to South Florida. I'll be back with a more look at Delta and our local forecast coming up.
Craig, thank you. And late tonight, dozens of first responders from South Florida deployed to Louisiana. The Urban Search and Rescue Team from Florida Task Force 2 just left Miami. A 45-person team will head to the Gulf Coast and be ready to help with water rescues once Hurricane Delta passes.
And Dr. Postel, you can see numerous boats off in the distance. And during Laura, that dock was covered. They said there was some flooding here due to Laura. It wasn't horrific. They did, of course, get nailed with the flooding from Rita. So, you know, Dr. Postel, when we're talking about that forecast, there's such nuances of exactly how big the storm is, what the wind speed is, and exactly where it makes landfall, depending on exactly how high that water is going to get. But we know it's going to go up.
It's going to go up, Stephanie, and it's going to be dangerous with the storm surge and the wind. We know that. I mean, Delta right now, Hurricane Delta is changing its structure as we speak. It looks to be getting a little bit bigger and also potentially strengthening right now. There it is over the southern Gulf of Mexico, and the cloud pattern is very obviously kind of expanding, and that's normal with the pulses of convection that we've been seeing this morning. But hurricane hunters are in there. This is a NOAA flight showing you that recently in the northern eye wall, they picked up winds around 90 miles per hour and a surface pressure there around 966. So we are going to continue to get that data coming in, and that will give us real-time information on roughly how strong Delta is. The track thinking has remained remarkably consistent. Kudos to the Hurricane Center on this, that really we haven't seen much change in the cone going, from the last couple of cycles and through now. And so what we see is likely a landfall later in the day on Friday as a very significant hurricane and then moving inland from there. So it's going to carry all the hazards of storm surge and destructive winds all the way from the coast well inland. The track, again, is pretty well, I wouldn't say set in stone, but we are fairly confident of where Hurricane Delta is going, because tomorrow morning there's going to be a couple of big features in the atmosphere that aren't going to let this thing wobble too much one way or the other. There's the forecast position for tomorrow morning from the Hurricane Center, and there's their track, and here are all the other tracks. And you can see pretty much the guidance is tightly clustered on a landfall likely somewhere in western Louisiana. And that's where the center of circulation goes. Now, I hear a lot of talk oftentimes like, oh, don't worry about the center. We have to worry about the center because everything else expands outward from that, like the wind patterns, for example. Here's what we think, and this is the radii, the wind radii from the Hurricane Center, that by middle of the afternoon tomorrow, as the hurricane approaches, hurricane force wind gusts excess of 75 miles per hour, likely in the red zone, and tropical storm force wind gusts likely in that yellow region that does extend well outside of the track by a good distance, likely over 100 miles from the center. Do expect tropical storm force wind gusts, at least for a little while after landfall. And then Delta continues to move inland and carry with it the potential for damaging winds through Louisiana and into parts of Mississippi late on Friday and into Saturday. But hopefully we can see a little bit of a weakening trend right up to landfall, and let's say the final 12 hours to landfall, in part because the water temperatures come down a little bit. They're below average. Now, they're certainly warm enough to support a hurricane, but they're not as potent as they are right now. In fact, that's where Delta is right now, over an area where there's a lot of heat content in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a lot of fuel oceanically to support the kind of storm we have right now. But as it moves northward, it is likely to encounter some cooler waters that are shallower, meaning there's not as much fuel oceanic side of things to support a significant or a major hurricane. It will be a powerful hurricane, no doubt about that, but perhaps we will see that weakening trend as indeed suggested by some of these models. There's the timestamp, and you can see landfall is right about there, let's say Friday late afternoon. But look at what happens. The guidance is telling us that perhaps there is a bit of a weakening trend on the final hours to landfall. Now, it's only a little bit, Jim. You know this, and it's very dangerous still. But this is one thing that perhaps we can all hope for, that maybe it will lose a little bit of its potency on final approach. Back to you, Jim.
All right, since you're the doctor, I'm going to defer to you on this one, Dr. Postel. I'm going to play viewer, and you're going to play doctor right now answering this question. Why haven't I seen an eye? This at one point was a Category 4 hurricane. It's now a developing Cat 2 heading back toward major. Where is my eye, Doc? Talk to me.
It's there, Jim. It was there, in fact. We just couldn't see it. It was obscured a little bit by some cirrus clouds up top. But if you looked underneath the hood and you looked at some of the other satellite images that really looked and dissected the internal structure of Delta, the eye was there prior to making landfall in the Yucatan, and the eye is trying to form right now with convection wrapping all the way around it. I will show those images next time I'm up, I think in a few minutes. But there is an eye there. It just doesn't show up very well in the satellite pictures because there's a bit of cirrus on top of it, Jim.
Right. If there's different types of satellite pictures that'll show it very, very well. Some of the microwave passes have been actually quite nice.
Yeah.
See, that's why you're the doctor, and I knew you can answer it for our viewers because our viewers are asking the very same question. Appreciate that, Posty.
Sure.
Take a look at what some of the modeling is showing us here in just a moment. So we got a new advisory from the Hurricane Center. The hurricane hunters have been out in the system, and they're just holding steady at 105 miles per hour, Category 2 storm right now. And as we look at the visible imagery, you can see that a little bit of an eye has been trying to develop over the last couple of hours, a little more well-defined in just the last couple of images. You also notice there's a little bit of, you can see just a little bit of thinness to the clouds on the underside of the system right in there. So I think some drier air is coming in, wrapping around the underside and maybe getting into the east side of the circulation as well.
The Gulf Coast bracing for a powerful hurricane yet again, Hurricane Delta, aimed at southwestern Louisiana.
In nearly the exact spot that's still recovering from Hurricane Laura, which hit in August. Hurricane specialist Brian Norcross is here to bring us up to speed on when the storm could make landfall. Brian.
Nicole and Louie, it's going to make landfall tomorrow, looks like late in the day, and it's uncanny to have two storms go in exactly the same spot. Not that it never happens, just not very often for sure. Category 2 right now, hurricane hunters are out there right now looking at the satellite. Look at the eye, it's really popping out. I'm betting that they're going to find something stronger than 105 mile-an-hour winds when we get the new advisory here in the next half hour. Here you see the forecast taking it up to 115 mile-an-hour Category 3 and then weakening some over the cool water near the coast, coming in as a Category 2, but looks like this maybe you'll go a little higher here. So if they say 2, you always get ready for 3. Here's that story that is so amazing. Here's the forecast for Delta, as I said, coming in as a Category 2. Now, this is where the hurricane force winds are. This is where the 40-mile-an-hour winds are out here. Now, look at Laura just in August. Essentially the same place. Those poor folks there that got just hammered by Laura. It is going to happen all over again. It's really just amazing. Imagine if they were just rebuilding as this thing comes in. Look how close those tracks are, and we don't know. They may be right on top of one another before this is over. When that is finished and it moves inland, we've got a flooding rain here in the south, and then just heavy rain on through the northeast, on into the Columbus Day weekend, up into New York and the northeast. It's going to be kind of nasty there, thanks to the remnants of Hurricane Delta. They're not going to have any kind of big storm, though, just kind of a nasty weekend. All right, that's it for now. Standing by for the new advisory from the Hurricane Center. Bye.
You know, here in South Florida, rainy season is scheduled to end in a week. October 15th is the end of rainy season. Today, a day within rainy season, didn't quite feel like one, even though it was very muggy outside. Take a look at First Alert Doppler 6000 because it's been like this much of the day, and you're hard-pressed to find any rain. I do see one tiny little shower down there by northernmost sections of Key Largo. That's it. Things are very quiet at this hour here, but not in the Western Gulf. That's where Hurricane Delta is. Delta now a major hurricane again. Cat 3 forecast to remain at that intensity as it approaches again Louisiana. And actually very close to where Hurricane Laura struck a few weeks ago at the end of the month of August. It is forecast to hit as a Category 3, not far from Lake Charles, or between Lake Charles and Lafayette. And remember, Lake Charles and Lafayette are small to medium-sized cities along Interstate 10. But south of there are numerous other communities which live in very low-lying areas where the storm surge can really do some damage on top of the wind and tornadoes and rain. So Delta is strengthening. Landfall will be late tomorrow. Our dry stretch here in South Florida, this unusual lack of rain, well, that's not going to last long. By the weekend, we'll see a better chance of showers. And yes, rip currents are possible across our local area. 85 in Marathon and Key West, 84 Miami and Fort Lauderdale with an east breeze at about 7 to 13 miles an hour across the local area. So a lot of the moisture is consolidating near the hurricane, which is well out to our west. Now, as that hurricane lifts northbound, well, we'll see a front that's helping it move towards the north, move into the state of Florida and destabilize our local environment. And therefore, the chance of rain appears in our forecast starting tomorrow and increasing further during the weekend. Now, tomorrow's showers are going to be widely scattered. I think they'll affect 25–30% of the viewing area, meaning that most of us won't see rain during the course of the day on Friday here in South Florida. Mainly clear, very warm though tonight, with a low of 79 degrees. If you're near the coast, it's going to be a little bit breezy. Tomorrow, a high of 89 degrees. There should be a good deal of sun tomorrow, but we're not going to rule out the risk of a shower or even a thunderstorm for tomorrow. Again, the rain chance is 30%. Then up to a 40% chance on Saturday, 50 on Sunday. Again, I'm not forecasting a washout for the weekend. Just be aware that there's going to be a better chance of rain. Roxy?
And to help us get a better handle on what condition this hurricane is in as it approaches the coast, the hurricane hunters constantly monitoring Delta as it tracks across the Gulf of Mexico. Today's flights from the Air Force, also NOAA's been out there too, but the Air Force flights came as Hurricane Delta forced their crews to leave their base in Biloxi, Mississippi, a Keesler Air Force Base, and relocate out of its path over to San Antonio. But there's nothing going to keep these men and women from flying into the hurricanes for you and me, to keep the Hurricane Center forecasters updated on what's going on inside the hurricane. They can put out the best warnings and forecasts possible, and that translates into emergency management and decision making, and you and I can do what we need to do to stay safe. And I wanted to again highlight, you look at the bottom right of your screen there, you see the evacuation headed westward on I-10 from the Lake Charles area toward Texas. And this is not all because of storm surge. A lot of people are leaving the Lake Charles area because of the wind threat in a community that was devastated by Hurricane Laura, and there just aren't enough safe places to stay. A lot of tarps on the roofs, and you got to shelter like you would for a tornado when you've got a major hurricane barreling down in your area, and trees can fall onto homes. The structure can be more easily damaged when the roof is compromised, and we've got to shelter safely. So there are storm surge areas that are under warnings that need to be evacuating, but we've also got the wind threat. Lake Charles itself not under a storm surge warning, but under a hurricane warning that extends all the way up into Alexandria. So we got to stay off the roads as soon as those winds start tomorrow and shelter like you would for a tornado. We will keep you safe during this entire storm. Our team coverage continues.
Hurricane Delta set to make landfall later today, bringing life-threatening storm surges just weeks after Hurricane Laura battered the Gulf Coast. Good morning, South Florida. Let's get started with a quick check on our weather.
Meteorologist Vivian Gonzalez here with the latest advisory on Delta and our forecast. Good morning, Viv.
Good morning, ladies, in South Florida. And Delta has been a major storm since last night, and throughout the overnight, still maintaining major status. It is a Category 3 system. Now, here's a look at the radar coming off from Louisiana to show you where the center of the storm is located. And you can see that the impacts are far-reaching. Some of those outer bands already moving through parts of Texas. Houston getting a pretty good batch of heavy rain. We have some strong thunderstorms around sections of Louisiana, Mississippi, and even Alabama. And those outer bands, another concern will be for the potential of seeing some isolated tornadoes spinning up. And water levels are definitely rising. Here's a look at some buoy data just to show you that tropical storm wind gusts already being clocked in up to hurricane force where near the center is located, but up to 45 in some locations, even 39-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And as far as the latest advisory is concerned, 120-mile-per-hour winds, that remains unchanged since last night. 120-mile-per-hour winds will continue to be the trend throughout the next couple of hours, moving to the north at 12 miles per hour. Based on the forecast track, it is going to turn to the northeast eventually as it aims for parts that have already been hit hard by Laura. It's taking a similar path. It may just go a little bit more west than where Laura made landfall, but nonetheless expected to be a strong hurricane, weakening a little bit, maybe down to Category 2 status with 110-mile-per-hour winds. Everyone Everyone in the warning area is shaded in red. That's where the center will likely make landfall. Everybody in the shaded area in green under tropical storm warnings. There are storm surge watches and warnings also in effect.
We cannot be complacent. The worst case is you get over-prepared and the storm's not that bad. We can live with that. Let's not be under-prepared. Secure your pets. If they're outside, bring them inside. Take care. They're part of the family, too. They're part of our community. Make sure that you're securing any furniture outside or anything, Halloween and Halloween decorations. You want to make sure that you bring those in, too. Anything that can turn into debris, bring that inside.
Okay, so yeah, bring all that stuff inside. I'm even here at the shopping complex on south of the city, and there's still some loose items that people could bring in. Not a lot of businesses boarded up, at least here in Lafayette, but the same can't be said elsewhere. I know coastal communities, I mean, it looks like a ghost town, and people are really taking this seriously. You know, Dr. Postel, especially those in Lake Charles, we saw the traffic on I-10, and we're going to talk more on that. Improving conditions this morning for those who are really trying to get out and didn't want to wait in that traffic. But once people ride out hurricanes and live through one like Laura, they say they oftentimes, almost everybody I've talked to says they will never do it again just because of how intense and terrifying it was. And even though Delta likely not to be as strong as Laura, this is still going to be one that's going to provide scary situations for those who stay behind.
It is a traumatic experience. You're exactly right about that, Chris. I've been through a dozen hurricanes myself, some of the legendary ones, extremely powerful ones, and it's changed me forever. So I understand, at least to some degree, what many people are worried about right now. And Delta is a formidable hurricane not far away. You can see from the coast of Louisiana and Texas on the satellite pictures. It is very impressive. We still have some extremely strong convection right here near the center of circulation with a lot of heavy rain and some very strong winds as well. Speaking of winds, if you want to get sort of an estimate of how far out maybe the 40 and 50 mile per hour winds extend over water, it may indeed be as much as 100 miles. So this is a fairly windy system that will carry some damaging winds at some distance from the center. What I can show you is I can sort of do this scan and show you basically about how far out the 50 mile per hour wind radii go over water. And you can see those are some pretty great distances, 100 to 150 miles. And again, this is over water, and once this moves on shore, the winds rapidly diminish. But still, the idea is that if you look at the legend, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds extend outward over 100 miles from the center overall. So that is fairly significant. Now, right now on the radar charts, we are getting some pretty heavy rain along the coast of Louisiana and well inland as well, I might add, and also over East Texas. The winds right along the coast for now are manageable, but as I showed you, those 40 to 50 mile per hour winds over water are really not that far offshore. And once that, in the next couple of hours, we may get some of those 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts along the coast. Right now you can see some of these numbers. Generally, we're seeing gusts at most to 30 to 35 miles per hour. Galveston gusting to 38. The worst of all the weather is confined to this part of Delta, right in the northern eye wall, where the hurricane hunters very recently came in there and found winds near 110 miles per hour on the pass southward through the northern eye wall with a pressure that was, well, somewhere around or just below 960 millibars. So very significant hurricane is just lurking offshore and is going to be moving in and bringing all the bad weather with it during the day today. So be prepared for the weather conditions to get a lot worse as we go through the morning and afternoon hours. There is some decent news here, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. When you look at the wind shear profiles, there's actually quite a bit of it right here hugging the coast. And as Delta continues to move northward, it will be impacted more and more by that wind shear, maybe adding to a little bit of weakening. In addition, this is also something that we've talked about. The water is cooler in the northern Gulf of Mexico, and it contains a less heat content, less fuel. So as Delta continues to move this way, it will be moving over progressively cooler waters and have less and less fuel along the way. So there is some hope that in these final 12 hours, let's say landfall is 7 o'clock tonight, that maybe we lose a little bit in the intensity. But it is still a powerful hurricane bringing in life-threatening surge and destructive winds along the way.
Of course. Well, joining us now is National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham. And Ken, thanks so much for joining us. That newest advisory just coming out here just before the 11 o'clock hour. Any changes made at this point with the system and the current thinking of where it'll be headed?
Well, the latest information, Alex, is the winds are 115, and 115 miles an hour is still a powerful hurricane. And even if we see fluctuations in that wind speed, the takeaway here is it's still just a dangerous storm, not just the wind speed, but the size. So the greater the size, I mean, tropical storm force winds extending out, nearly 150 miles. So that means the bigger the storm, the more the storm surge, and the bigger the wind field, more people will feel the impacts of that wind.
And of course, we always deal with these systems, and they all have their own identity. What would be your biggest concern when it comes to Delta as we head on through this afternoon and evening?
I think it's so important to remember, even if we see fluctuations of that intensity, the size itself, that is life-threatening storm surge. When you really look at these values, Alex, I mean, 5 to 8 foot from Holly Beach over the Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, but Vermilion Bay, 7 to 11 foot of storm surge. So that water is going to get into the bay. All the bayous, all the canals that normally drain the rain out, they're going to flow the other way as that storm surge gets in there. So it's dangerous, not just on the coast, but inland as well. Morgan City to Port Fourchon, 4 to 7 foot of storm surge. So life-threatening storm surge. We already see the water levels coming up.
And of course, that's why in some of these areas evacuations are up, and folks need to be out of there at this point. Also, of course, when it comes to these systems, rainfall, that can be a problem as well, even though this thing will be moving and not expected to stall out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even a fast-moving storm, the efficient rain. I saw Baton Rouge getting 6 inches of rain yesterday just in those rain bands ahead of the storm. So some areas, 6 to 10 inches of rain, maybe even over 10 to 12 inches of rain in some areas. But remember, that's the core rains. To the right-hand side, those rain bands are going to start setting up from the Mississippi coast, the New Orleans metropolitan area, back through Lafayette and Baton Rouge. Some of those rain bands could produce heavy rainfall and even severe weather. The right front quadrant, 90% of your tornadoes are in that area.
No doubt about it. Well, thanks so much, National Hurricane Center Director there, Ken Graham. We appreciate you joining us, updating us here on the very latest thinking there when it comes to Hurricane Delta. Well, tropical storm conditions continuing and starting to pick up in Creole, Louisiana. That is there in Cameron Parish here in the southwestern part of the state, just east of Cameron. Hurricane and storm surge warnings, they are in effect. This area could see up to 8 inches of rain through tomorrow's.
And welcome back to our coverage of Hurricane Delta. We have a brand new advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and it is now a Category 2 storm with winds of 110 miles per hour. So as advertised, we are seeing a slow decline in the intensity of the storm as it moves to the north-northeast now at 14 miles per hour. Some of the very worst weather likely approaching the coast in about 3 hours or so. Already conditions going downhill. We've seen winds as high as 60 miles per hour in Lake Charles. It's going to be a long period of very strong wind there, even as people continue to recover from Hurricane Laura. Some 6,000 homes covered with tarps, and many of those tarps are likely going to be blown away by the wind, which is going to mean there will be some significant rain and water damage to those homes. There you see the forecast from the Hurricane Center. Storm moving in this evening. As I mentioned, next few hours is when we expect to see that northern eye wall starting to affect the coast. And then here you see stronger winds aloft that are affecting the storm. That wind shear that we talked about, drier air as well, also affecting the storm, and cooler water. So all of these things, Paul, serving to weaken the system, but you've got a lot of momentum that is built up already. It's been a very powerful storm for a long time, and so that is going to mean a long night, Paul, of wind and heavy rain and serious surge along the coast.
And it's so much about momentum, Carl, because again, these hurricanes, they don't have brakes. It's imagine like this bus here, library bus. You're cruising down the Gulf of Mexico at 115 miles per hour. You've got no brakes. It's not going to slow down. It's going to coast down as it comes on towards the coast, but it's already moving. It's kind of going downhill and coasting. So it's no longer using the engine. It's just using its forward momentum, and that's what's coming on shore right now. And we have a lot of weather to get through before we get to that center. A lot of people are caught up on that center point. When will landfall happen? Landfall's not going to happen for hours. This is happening now, and this will happen for hours. Take a look at the wind just driving the rain off even the roof of this building here. We're getting extremely strong northeasterly winds gusting well over 30 miles per hour, making the rain almost sting as it kind of hits your face here. And that is what we're going to deal with for hours. So that is going to continue, except the rain can get heavier and the wind will get stronger and gustier as we head, as Carl mentioned, through a very long night here. That center, we have a very high likelihood of the actual eye, or what's left of it, to come right over here in Jennings, Louisiana. We're about midway between Lafayette, which is to our east, and Lake Charles, which is to our west, by about 40, 50 miles each way here. The actual center point, the National Hurricane Center is forecasting to come just to the west of us around Welsh, Louisiana by about, say, 10, 12 miles or so, which means we're going to be that right front quadrant. And as big as that eye is, we're most likely going to have the eye come right over us. So as the weather goes downhill, it gets at its worst, then we have the slight calm of the eye, then we have the backside of the eye wall to get through. So the weather will no longer improve. It'll only decline as we head on through that center point, and then briefly decline through the eye. Then the back edge of the eye wall, also pretty intense weather coming on through here. So we're in this for the long haul here. But the only good news, Carl, is that forward speed has been slowly picking up momentum in terms of moving onshore, which means the faster it moves on out of here and the faster we start seeing the decline in this pretty poor weather conditions that we'll be dealing with for the rest of the day. Carl?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a very tough night, Paul. Paul, there is now a flash flood warning in your area. And if you would, let's just talk about the fact that you've got water coming from two directions. You've got water coming out of the sky, of course, and as all the creeks and rivers begin to fill up and try to run back down towards the Gulf, well, they don't empty out as quickly because you've got that increasing onshore push.
Yeah, Carl, last night, if you were watching or viewers watching us, we were over by Bayou Nepakay, which is basically a rain-fed bayou, which kind of drains, say, the eastern half of Jeff Davis Parish, which we're in, and that's going to be filling up. That's fed by rainwater. Then you have the surge coming in, so it's difficult for that bayou to kind of empty out towards the Gulf because we have the surge coming in. Then we have the rain coming into the bayou, so more flooding there. And even just around here, some of the streets are seeing some rain. I'm going to walk over here to this puddle. The ground I'm walking on is now soggy. You can hear it and feel it. Your feet kind of sliding into even just the grassy areas. So if you're getting this, and we're maybe not even 12 hours into some of the heavier rain. By the way, we did have rain yesterday, but nothing as heavy as it is now. And normally this is kind of a low spot, but even this low spot will start filling up with more and more water, and usually areas that aren't so low will start filling up with water. So we have multiple threats here. But I tell you what, this is just the beginning of a long, dangerous process we're into. The only good news is we're seeing a lot of this during the daylight hours. So if people live in flood-prone areas, they might be able to see it coming up versus coming through as Laura did in the middle of the night, 2, 3 a.m. This is coming a little sooner and hopefully coming out by 2 or 3 a.m. But if people have evacuated, great. Stay there. Stay tuned here in the Weather Channel. We have plenty of fallback positions, higher ground as well. We have places to hide from the wind. We know how to do this, but mandatory evacuations, if you are going to ride this out where you are, just be aware that first responders aren't coming to get you until the weather conditions improve, which means not until tomorrow. So hopefully, Carl, people are going to stay safe in yet another landfalling system that we're dealing with here in the state of Louisiana. Now, I guess the fourth time so far just this 2020 Atlantic hurricane season.
But lived here for a long time. They said Rita, they had water up to their roofs. So they know the precautions. They have a plan in place if they do have to leave last minute, but they're staying with their homes.
All right, Tracy Anthony, there in Iberia Parish, that you've got that scene, you've got that local disposition to it. You unfortunately are going to be in one of the areas where we do expect nominal storm surge to ramp up even further throughout the day. So you're getting a little bit right now, but as it moves inland, there could be areas maybe upwards of 5 to 10 feet and even higher. So I'm hoping for the best for those people that have decided to stay there and ride it out. Thank you so much. Our field correspondent there, Tracy Anthony, on scene. But it's going to be an area of storm surge, what we've just been looking at a little bit earlier, could be one of the worst issues being just east of that center of the storm that's expected to make landfall in a little while. You can see Hurricane Delta from another vantage point, 110 mile per hour max sustained winds. I'm joined in now here, meteorologist David Neal on hand. He's going to have the in-depth analysis showing exactly what's going to be going on with this expected landfall. It looks to be, David, we have moved this up a couple of hours when I say we, the National Hurricane Center. So this looks to be a little bit earlier, and now that little easterly component has started to come in too.
Yeah, we had a little bit more of an easterly component that was really showing up, but it's all a portion of what has actually happened with the storm is we're getting a southwesterly now that's coming into the storm that we didn't have all along. So there are changes coming up. This was in the forecast all along. I was just talking to Ken Graham. He was like, you know, this kept showing up in all of our computer modeling. As we look at it right now, a lot of these statistics are still pointing to 60 to 70 mile per hour winds coming on shore. And a closer look at the actual storm says winds at 110, according to the National Hurricane Center, 963 millibars, which last night we had the storm going right over the buoy that was out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and it almost completely confirmed everything that the recon aircraft was talking about with the actual sensor that was in the water where the eye went right over it. We've increased our speed a little bit now to 14 miles per hour, which brings the actual eye on shore a little bit earlier, but we were always talking about how we knew the effects would begin to show up by noontime, and thus that has happened. Again, on the infrared, you can see a little bit closer as to what is happening here and what is going to happen into the future. Let me go to the radar here, actually, and we'll take a look at it. Sadly, we don't have the Lake Charles, Louisiana radar to be able to go back and look at, but the one thing we do see is that we have this storm filling in just a little bit more. It starts filling in on the south side, and it's preventing thunderstorms from wrapping in and around the system. I can show you every little drop that shows up on radar imagery, and it's broken to the south side. So the northern banding is what is going to be the worst. That's what we're going to see as far as everything that's included with this storm being the highest winds are going to be right in this area. There's the low pressure center that is the hurricane. And right now, as you look at it, that northern eye wall is only about 30 miles away from coming on shore, which means the worst of the winds are about an hour away. If you're moving at 15 to 17, you can make up that 30 miles there in about an hour's time. So that's what we're looking at now. That would be Cameron Inlet, back over to the east, all the way over to the western side of the bay, Vermilion Bay, Grand Lake. Everybody there is included. And then again, on Highway 90, we'd be looking at some of the highest winds coming into New Iberia, Homa, Franklin, Thibodaux, and all the way back over to and including Jeanerette. I think you're going to get some of your highest winds in the next hour or two. That goes down to Snake Island, Marsh Island there, where Brandon Clement is, and then back to the west over to Cameron Parish, most of which we are still watching now. Lafayette here. Lafayette's one of those areas where you're far enough inshore here on I-10, just north of New Iberia. You're going to have some of the high winds there, but it looks like for the most part you're a little bit east of the situation there. Lake Charles, you're going to be in the brunt of the highest winds coming in from the south. The other part of this that we cannot ignore is the rain and rain rates. It is coming down in bucket loads here, and I can show you over the past few moments we have generated as much as 6 to 8 inches of new rain. In summary, it's been as much as 12 inches, I think, in a few isolated spots already as you get further to the east and down to the south here, 5 or 6 inches right along the coastal areas. That's the intercoastal waterway on the inside coming out of the Sabine River. Weather Nation, this is what we do. Join us the rest of the day. Tracy Anthony, Ben McMillan, Brandon Clement, and Brett Adair out and about. We'll be back in a moment.
45 or 55 miles an hour. Here's the problem. The core of the strongest winds are still just to our south. So as the storm works its way, charges its way towards the north, Delta brings winds in, slashing portions of southern Louisiana, and unfortunately right here in Lake Charles and other portions of Calcasieu Parish, such as Moss Bluff and areas towards the south near Cameron too. A lot of the winds right now are from the north. Overall, that northerly direction will hold, perhaps a deviation towards the north and east. But look at the secondary shot or whatever is on the right-hand side of your screen here. It's a lot of trash. Here's the problem. That trash actually came from Laura in late August. So when Laura came through, Category 4 hurricane, absolutely devastating. 140 to 150 mile an hour winds in some spots with this storm. So what's going to happen today and in the remaining hours as we go throughout the evening hours today is any sort of debris, perhaps not necessarily those piles of debris, but any loose limbs that weren't brought down or any shingles that are still loose on folks' homes, that'll become a projectile potentially as the core of those strongest winds work their way through. So I don't think, even though we're not necessarily getting the eye of the storm, the point I want to drive home is you don't need the eye of the storm. Sometimes outside of the eye can be the worst part, and I actually think that's what we're seeing in terms of the winds to the north. Yes, overall that will hold as this system holds, but even to the west, it's just a different direction. That's the only difference with this storm compared to what we saw with Laura, where we pretty much took a direct hit. Now it's not going to be a direct hit, but it will still be a hit nonetheless, and a hit that a lot of folks here in Lake Charles do not want, nor do they need. So we'll go throughout the day today. Visibility has already been reduced to about 3/4 of a mile, Carl. And then the rainfall rates right now near half an inch at times. So we've got the heavy rain, we've got the strong winds, and unfortunately the winds will get stronger as we go throughout the day today. As we go throughout tonight and tomorrow, what happens to the intensity of Delta?
Well, Tevin, it's definitely on its way down, and in fact, we're seeing some real changes to the internal structure of the storm right now. We got the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center, now 105 mile per hour storm, Category 2, and the pressure is the same, and the movement is the same, north-northeast at 14 miles per hour. You can see the big bursting of thunderstorms now coming into the coast, but I want you to notice how the clouds across northern Louisiana and into Mississippi are rapidly moving away to the northeast. That is the strong wind aloft that is now beginning to affect the system. And when you look at the radar picture here, you can see where the eye has been. Take a look at that northeastern eye wall. That has actually been sort of blown to the northeast relative to that core. So the entire internal structure of the storm is not as organized now. It's starting to tilt because of that stronger wind that's coming in. So these are all good signs as it's not as organized, but we do have a tremendous band. That band that's being blown off to the northeast, that is the eye wall that is coming up towards Pecan Island right now and maybe towards Lafayette as well. And it's going to be a really close call there in Lake Charles. Already winds now gusting to 50 miles per hour. That eye wall is probably going to be really close to you. We're getting a surge of 3, 4 to 5 feet right along the coast there. And looking at the model forecast going forward, we expect that area of very strong winds will come up through Lake Charles over the next several hours here and points in between Lake Charles and Lafayette, including Jennings.
We're already seeing the eye wall come ashore. We just got the 5 o'clock update. Still maximum winds 105 miles per hour, but that's down from the earlier peak of 120 miles per hour. And now it's moving to the north-northeast at 14, so it's making that turn here. Once it makes landfall, it will quickly fall apart, though. It has a lot of things working against it. It has a lot of shear, a lot of dry air has wrapped around it, too. So this is going to dissipate just in the next couple of days very quickly. And the models here show the remnants there heading up towards Ohio and even the Great Lakes. So here's what it looks like on the radar here. Here's the eye wall right here. Let's take a closer look. That has already come ashore. So this is the most powerful part of the storm here, and it's already pivoting in. And you can see it's kind of elongating a little bit too. So it's getting less organized, but strong gusty winds already hitting the coast there, and also damaging winds here and storm surge expected through this area. This is a very unpopulated part of the Louisiana coastline, thank goodness, but you head inland a little bit. And of course, you got Lake Charles, Lafayette, Jennings, all populated areas.
Winds right now 105 miles per hour as a Category 2 hurricane. It's moving north-northeast now, so it's made that easterly turn going 14 miles an hour. You can see, as Stephanie was alluding to, everything's front-loaded, so everything is on the northern side at this point. The really strong stuff is right in here from the coastline up to, say, I-10, and there's a really strong band that's just come down on shore. There's a look at the forecast, and we think this is going to dissipate relatively quickly. Reason being interaction with land, but also some really strong now westerly wind shear is taking over on this, and so the center circulation might become actually relatively exposed here and then pushing its way off into the Tennessee Valley here over the next, say, 36 hours or so. There's a look at it on the infrared satellite. A cluster of thunderstorms is right on shore at this point, but we're getting a decent push of drier air and westerly shear from the western side, and that's going to start to really decrease the intensity of this hurricane. We still have some really heavy rain that's falling for us right now. That's what we have flash flood warnings in effect here. It does include that I-10 corridor between Lake Charles and over toward, say, Jennings, and then into Lafayette as well. Lake Charles, our winds are gusting to nearly 50 miles an hour. Port Arthur gusts out of the north here at 63 miles an hour. So it could be a little bit of a convergence happening on that western side of the hurricane, and so that's why we might maximize winds there a little bit more. Calcasieu, Cameron, Jefferson Davis parishes all under flash flood warnings right now. I think we'll be there for hours. Beaumont, Port Arthur, this is an area that floods very easily. Jefferson and Orange counties in Texas under flash flood warnings right now. The accumulation is really now starting to pick up pretty quickly here. A lot of places are seeing 5 inches of rain already. I think we're going to get several more inches on top of that, especially with this second heavy slug of rain that comes in for us here. So just be aware of what's coming in here. There's a look at the radar estimates over the last 24 hours, and some of these totals now really impressive. Just outside of Baton Rouge, about 8 inches of rain has fallen for us there.
You are looking live at the eye wall of Hurricane Delta, the first hurricane with a Greek name to make landfall here in the lower 48. We're going to be in this for about the next 30 minutes, and I anticipate, I was just looking at the radar during the commercial break, down towards Port Arthur, we've gusted to 96 miles an hour. That weather is rotating up to us. And Port Arthur is, I should say Lake Arthur, excuse me. Lake Arthur, which is 11 miles to our south, gusting to 96 miles an hour. The weather there is rotating right up to us. So we can look and see what's happening in Lake Arthur. I know we have a camera there. We are taking, here and there and see what weather will be coming our way. But it's pretty bad. I mean, we went downhill very quickly. Say that one more time about the damage. Okay, you're seeing the damage in Lake Arthur. And what caused that will be making its way to us. It's going to last about 30 minutes here, the worst of the weather, and then we will get into the eye of this hurricane. Now, I want to show you around and what it's looking like here. And the visibility is key. We were showing you earlier that water tower. That gives you an idea of just how bad it is here. And you see the winds just driving that rain down the street, knocking over big planters. We have this one here. Anything that's top heavy is getting knocked over right now. Really not flooding that we're concerned about here. Obviously, you're seeing a little bit of that rain accumulating, but I'm not concerned about significant flooding. But if you just look down the street, look at the trees whipping around. The power lines, it seems as if there is still power in this neighborhood. From what I can tell, I see lights on a house down there. And I do know that this area was affected by Laura, and there are some homes with blue tarps. So we will check on those homes later. And there were some debris piles with trees and whatnot that it seemed as if there was cleanup for Laura. We want to now go to Lake Charles and check in with Charles Peak. And he was there for Hurricane Laura and is now there again. Charles, have the tarps been flapping in the wind, or have they been able to stay and protect these homes?
Steph, in some cases, both. I've run across quite a few of them where they're being ripped off of homes and businesses. Some of them have additional boarding that they put on and seem to be faring okay, but winds have been really picking up here in the last little bit, so we'll have to see how the rest of them hold up.
Let's talk about the power, Charles, because Louisiana and Texas, we're talking over 110,000 customers, a lot more people, 110,000 customers without power. And I just saw Tevin Wooten, who's there with you. He tweeted that they lost power in Lake Charles. Have you seen a lot of power lines down, and can you even distinguish between damage from Laura and damage from this storm?
In some cases, it's a little difficult on the side roads, but the main roads, I've had several situations where you've got poles leaning over or almost completely down, bringing power lines down, and those situations on some of the major arteries through here. So I would feel pretty confident that that is fresh damage that's going on. But in some of their other areas right where I'm at, I see a street light on here, so they've got power here, but it is sporadic throughout the town as it continues to deteriorate.
Okay, so let's talk about the rain. You guys have been getting rain for a while. Have you seen any flooding or problems with the rainwater so far?
Yeah, Stephanie, I just came through back just a few blocks to my east where many of the roads there, they're the side roads, but they're as deep as 2 foot of water. They're running sort of like a river down the roads. And so a lot of the streets are flooded at this time.
Now, what about the debris? We know that there have been a lot of piles of debris around there. Have you seen debris starting to fly yet?
In some cases, mainly it's been the sheet metal type stuff that's so easy to pick up. I haven't seen any tree limbs blowing at this point in time, but some street signs, the metal type stuff have seen blowing in very low locations.
All right, Charles, we certainly appreciate you chatting with us here, and we'll be checking in with you throughout the duration of the storm. And there's our strongest wind gust. Now we're feeling it. I was kind of waiting for this. I knew this was going to be coming in from Lake Arthur, where they were gusting up to 96 miles an hour. I'm now at the point in the storm where the rain feels like pebbles on your face. That's how fast and how strong it is hitting any exposed skin. A little bit of a lull, and then it's going to, we just gusted to 62 miles per hour here in Jennings. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got some gusts even higher than that, because you can tell now, even from just last 15 minutes, things have gotten worse, and they get, they deteriorate pretty quickly. We can show you the trees that are swaying in the wind here, and down the street, the visibility is awful, just sheets of rain going down. So far, the damage has been minimal. But of course, this is something we'll continue to watch for. I see there's a little debris in the road over here. Just a little piece of something. I'm not quite sure what it is. I could try walking down there and checking it out. But otherwise, when it comes to rainfall here, look, you can't really drive easily through this street because this is all water. This is the type of water that if you go too fast in your car, then you could run into problems because of that standing water on the ground here. But just down the street, notice that visibility, and everything is coming from the east. All right, so we have the east wind, east blowing towards the west because of the counterclockwise nature of a hurricane. That will shift as the storm moves inland, and our winds will shift from the west to the east. That will come much later. We'll be right back with more.
Now starting to rip up, a lot of these blue tarps that are on roofs, protecting homes from intrusion of rain, but now they're wet on the outside and the inside, unfortunately. And as Jim was alluding to, we do officially have landfall. Near Creole, Louisiana is Category 2, winds at 100 miles per hour. Pressure's coming up a little bit here, Jim, at 970 millibars. We think it's going to start to degrade here pretty quickly, but overall, the course of action from this point going forward is improvements, okay? We know that we've got still 100-mile-per-hour winds officially, although we haven't seen any winds to that strength measured quite yet, but I would anticipate that we could have a decent amount of wind still to go here before this is done, but mostly here on the northern side. Again, north-northeast movement at 14 miles per hour. A lot of flash flood warnings are in effect right now, so we've had some places record already half a foot of rain today. Now, here's the key thing. I'm going to point out a couple things. So Tevin Wooten sits in here, Stephanie Abrams right here in Jennings, Mike Seidel's in Scott, Jim Cantor over here in Breaux Bridge. And you can see the outline of the eye is about that. So a northeast movement like that could literally put all four of our live meteorologists in the eye simultaneously. The worst of the weather's happening right here around Jennings, and we're getting a pretty decent blast of weather around us, around Scott as well.
Jim, I'm just getting a nice little gust right here. This eye, as we were talking about earlier, is a dirty eye, right? It's not a perfectly formed eye. But Jim, I don't know if you've been watching the pressure, if you have an anemometer with you. We're down to 975.8, so we're still dropping here. In the center of circulation, which is elongated and getting ripped apart, and we're getting some upper level energy in it as well. So it's not this perfect scenario that we're used to. It's much more complicated with this system.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, that's another little surprise. Besides the west wind being so strong on this, getting the strongest winds on the west side of this thing, that surprised me, really, getting these kind of wind gusts. You hate to see that, that's for sure, because there's an issue somewhere. But we probably had 60-mile-per-hour gusts roll through here in Breaux Bridge, but it doesn't take much to cause the power to go out, and certainly a couple trees. You can smell it. You can smell limbs that are down through here. It's kind of amazing, too, Steph, that you're seeing the pressure still going down. You would think, obviously as the storm comes in, it starts to fill a little bit. It's not happening as quickly as what we might think. Perhaps an explanation, or part of the explanation, as to why even in the dry side of this, we're getting wind gusts that are still as high, let's say down in Cameron and Vermilion Parish, still getting some 80s and 90s. So the moral of the story here for you, Stephanie, is maybe we'll see the winds pick up again, this time from a southwest flank. coming into use. So we'll see. Either way, we're up without power here in Breaux Bridge. Mike Sedell says we haven't even gusted yet over 50 miles per hour at the airport in Lafayette, which is on the southeast side of the city. So, that's, big difference, obviously, in where you are in relation to that eye wall, which is, continuing to collapse as it moves north. But there's a lot of wind energy with this. And now it's interacting with the mid-latitude jet that we get in fall. So, again, expect a lot more wind than what you might think. It's pretty low pressure, all right, coming ashore at 970 millibars. We'll be right back.
More video that's been streaming in. You can see the wind so strong, taking down trucks trying to get to and from. This is Lake Charles, so that was northwest side of the hurricane as it came through. And not good to see the stuff overturn. I hope everybody's okay in that sort of a situation, and maybe it's just things overturned and it's damage to vehicles and not damage to anything else and anybody. So these are the latest stats, and the National Hurricane Center said from an hour from now, a full update comes in, and that's going to be it for at least the hourly updates to and from landfall that have occurred 4 hours ago. We were in continual coverage for about 2 out of those, and every hourly update coming in. The latest winds down to 80 miles per hour. Pressure to 971 miles per hour and north-northeastward movement, 15 miles per hour. Looks to be the strongest winds surrounding now into the south central parts of Louisiana. This is affecting Lafayette and outside of Lake Charles right now. We'll get those stronger winds maybe outside of Baton Rouge, but there it is. We're expecting in the next hour for this to come up, and that's about central time right now, and then going from there farther inland and farther northward. Now, this thing is not going to pick up much speed, not gaining speed to 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. The expectations and the movement I'm seeing here up until the midnight hour tonight, still on the order of about 15 miles per hour or so. So it's going to be in Louisiana for a while. And that does mean that there still could be some strong and gusty winds of tropical storm strength, which is why warnings and advisories are still up like that. We don't see this crossing over to Louisiana, from Louisiana into Arkansas until we go through the day on Saturday. But the breadth of the moisture and the precipitation extend farther outward from this storm. It will be in these vicinities and see these individual storm cells that come out during the heat of the day on Saturday. That is the risk that might be sparking some tornadoes.
Brand new advisory in from the National Hurricane Center on Delta. It's still a hurricane. Even though these systems make landfall, they don't just go away. This is still producing maximum sustained winds of 75 miles an hour. And so we've still got hurricane warnings along the coast. It's going to take a little more time for this to spin down and for those hurricane force winds in the coastal areas and with some very strong gusty winds to lighten up as this moves northward. So still a Category 1 hurricane, moving north-northeast at 15 miles an hour. So it came ashore, moving along at 15 miles an hour. But as we feared, the rain rates are so high that we're still getting flash flood emergencies. So much for a moving along hurricane not being an inland flood threat. It's definitely still producing that kind of problem, and it's mostly front-loaded. But the backside is still windy, even though it's not as rainy. Now let's take a look at the new track and intensity forecast, and this will be an update that comes out every 6 hours, right? It's 11 p.m. Eastern Time and 10 p.m. Central Time, and it's going to weaken pretty quickly in terms of the sustained winds. So right now, it's a hurricane. It'll be a tropical storm before too much longer. All it has to do is come below 74 miles an hour. And then tomorrow morning, breakfast time, this will be still a tropical storm, if this forecast is exactly right, all the way up into northeastern Louisiana. And then we have a tropical depression and something losing its tropical characteristics as it goes through northern portions of Mississippi and into Tennessee. But increasingly, this will become mainly a rain problem. But remember that the sustained winds are just that, sustained winds. The gusts can be a good bit stronger than that. So we still have the hurricane warnings up along the coastline from High Island over to Morgan City. Now, we'll have to see if some of the local forecast offices do any shaving off or changes of these inland warnings. But for the time being, along the coast, that hurricane warning is still up. And this is kind of an update on where Delta is and where it has been as compared to Laura. Made landfall earlier this evening, about 12 miles east of the landfall location of the center of Laura. And interestingly, ironically, the location of the landfall of the center of Delta is the location where we had the maximum storm surge just to the east of where the landfall of Laura was in Cameron. So just 12 miles difference makes a world of difference in terms of where the maximum storm surge occurs. In the case of Delta, the maximum surge is probably somewhere out here in a very sparsely populated area east of Creole and west of Pecan Island, but this area still got 8 or 10 feet of storm surge flooding all the way out to 50 miles east of there, even into Vermilion Bay and up into Abbeville. So, Mark, as we anticipated, this large system that's moving along is still able to produce storm surge that is pretty high and rainfall that is pretty significant in terms of the flooding. We've got flash flood emergency still affecting Lake Charles and in Alexandria.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nicole Perez.
And I'm Calvin Hughes. Local 10 News starts right now.
Live. The one and only Local 10 News starts right now.
Developing off the top of Delta, roaring ashore along the Gulf Coast, making landfall in Louisiana tonight, hitting areas already ravaged by another hurricane just 6 weeks ago.
And the Category 2 storm bringing destructive winds, heavy flash flooding, and dangerous storm surge. This herd of cattle here got caught up in the strong winds.
And you're looking at live pictures right now from New Orleans, where rain bands have been moving through the night. Delta adding to what's been a record-breaking season.
And Local 10's Connor Powell leads us off now with our team coverage on the ground in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Calvin, Hurricane Delta smashing into the Gulf Coast tonight with high winds up to about 100 miles an hour, knocking out power to more than 300,000 people from Texas to Louisiana. Delta striking land is a powerful Category 2 hurricane, unleashing fury on Louisiana, packing powerful, destructive winds, gusts clocking up to 96 miles an hour, pushing life-threatening storm surge over 8 feet deep inland, relentless rains triggering rising floodwaters.
From the time it hits the shore to about to when it leaves the state should be about 14 hours.
Nearly 10,000 people are seeking safety in storm shelters, many still displaced from Hurricane Laura at the end of August.
Just starting to clean up debris from this last storm. It's unfortunate that they're going to take another hit.
As we remember with Hurricane Laura, once the storm has passed, there will still be threats to people's lives and safety.
After delivering a dangerous blow to Louisiana, Delta is forecast to soak the East Coast as far north as New Jersey, dropping up to 6 inches of rain in some places.
Dan, and to all the good people in Louisiana, we wish you well. We wish you safety, Godspeed as you work through another hurricane.
Hopefully after this storm passes, the country will not forget that the rebuilding begins, and it's a long path. And the aid from outside the state really helps us rebuild as these people are down on their luck.
Hurricane Delta is starting to lose some of its punch. It has been downgraded, but we are still seeing strong winds, and there are lots of reports of significant flooding and a lot of wind damage. In Lake Charles, Connor Powell, Local 10 News.
And our team coverage continues now with Chief Meteorologist Betty Davison. Betty, where is Delta now?
Good evening. That center of circulation is churning over parts of Louisiana still. More inland now, pulling away from the coast as of the 11 p.m. advisory, 70 miles northeast of Cameron, Louisiana. And notice, still a hurricane with winds of 75 miles per hour, but it's going to continue to weaken as it moves north-northeast at 15 miles per hour. And notice how that rain is just blanketing the northern part of that state. So by tomorrow morning, or this morning, I should say, a tropical storm, and it'll continue to spin down as it moves northeastward. That landfall officially happening near the town of Creole, Louisiana, 6 p.m. Central Time, and that town is about 14 miles east of Cameron, Louisiana. That's where Hurricane Laura made landfall just weeks ago, coming in as a Category 2. Hurricane Delta did. Still pounding Louisiana tonight. Nicole?
All right, thank you very much, Jim. And indeed, it looks like, as we expected, Delta is rapidly starting to decrease in wind intensity now as it continues to move rapidly to the north. The center of the circulation just south of the Alexandria area, and this will rapidly move off into northeast parishes, Louisiana, and eventually into northwest Mississippi, already getting some of this heavy rain there. Again, the winds right now down to 60 miles an hour, and the pressure coming up pretty quickly at 985 millibars. On this track, that would take the center of Delta right on up just south of Memphis, up over the Nashville area, and then eventually on up into the upper Ohio Valley. All along this course, we're going to be looking at some locally heavy rain, even though the wind speeds, of course, will continue to come down. But there's still some pretty gusty winds, as you saw there, upwards of 60 miles an hour, particularly here across northern Louisiana. But I think we're transitioning more to the flood threat now, particularly there where the center of circulation is. Now, in Avoyelles, Evangeline, and Rapid East Parish, we're talking about some locally still heavy rain. Our own Chris Warren was there in Alexandria, and you could see some of the flooding in the parking lot where he was. We've actually had some reports of well over a foot of rain, almost a foot and a half in some areas. Back here in Nacogdoches, Wynn, and Grant parishes, as well as Sabine County there in eastern Texas, also some flood warnings in effect. Still some locally very heavy rain here from Monroe almost down toward the Natchez area. So Catahoula and Concordia parishes also under the flash flood warnings. Here's some of those rainfall tallies, and again, in excess of a foot just south of Alexandria. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a report of 17 inches in a little town called Iowa, just east of Lake Charles, between there and Lafayette. 17 inches of rain. That's going to cause some pretty serious flooding. A couple of rivers already, the Mississippi right at Baton Rouge and also near Lake Charles, we're talking about in major flood stage, and I'm sure some of these other rivers and streams, even along the Atchafalaya, may go into major flood stage as all this water has to continue to drain off toward the south.
Delta no longer a hurricane this morning. The system downgraded to a tropical storm as it makes its way across parts of the south.
Heavy rain bringing a flood of trouble for those areas, and there's still more in store this weekend. Let's get right to meteorologist Erica Delgado with the very latest on Tropical Storm Delta.
She is live in the Plex with the details for us and our local forecast. Hey, Erica.
That's right, Ethan, and I have the latest advisory that just came in. As of 8 a.m., wind speeds of 40 miles per hour. We have a weakening system over northwest Louisiana, and you can see the cloud cover and the moisture associated with it extends as far north as the Ohio Valley. It's moving rather quickly towards the north-northeast at 16 miles per hour. Here's the latest forecast track. Models do have Delta weakening into a tropical depression as we head into this afternoon, and continuing to do so now that its fuel energy, the ocean, has been cut off. You can see it here still producing some gusty winds and heavy rainfall as far north as the Ohio Valley. It is spreading rainfall across the area and still tropical storm force winds in its path, and you can see a tail of moisture now beginning to push through areas like Mississippi and Alabama and even across the Florida Panhandle. And we have multiple advisories, watches and warnings in that area, including severe thunderstorm warnings. And for us here, it's helping draw in some of this tropical moisture from the south, and that's why we're seeing these showers moving from south to north, even though our wind pattern is from east to west. So we will see moisture on and off throughout the day today, indirectly related to Delta. We'll take a closer look at your forecast coming up in just a few.
Well, Tropical Storm Delta leaving behind a trail of trouble soon after making landfall in Louisiana.
The harsh weather delivering another blow to an area still recovering from Hurricane Laura. Reporter Caroline Shavley is live in Lake Charles with a look at what the storm brought there overnight. Caroline, good morning.
Good morning to you, Ethan and Lorena. Hurricane Delta roared on shore south of here in Creole, Louisiana as a Cat 2 storm. They are certainly used to storms here, the last one coming just 6 weeks ago, but it doesn't get any easier. For Louisiana residents, it was a bad case of deja vu. Battered by a hurricane for the second time in 6 weeks, pelted by sheets of rain, hammered by high winds. Delta sent shards of sheet metal bouncing down a street, and that was the danger here, flying debris, both from this storm and leftover from Hurricane Laura in late August. Thousands fled, but some stayed.
If something happens, me and my family gonna go out together. We've done about 20 search and rescue missions where we're pulling people from homes right now.
Early Saturday, the Cajun Navy was once again patrolling the streets in Lake Charles. The rescue and relief group has been on the ground here since Hurricane Laura hit in August, helping hard-hit residents get back to their homes.
People are trapped by floodwater. There's debris that's keeping them from being able to get out of their homes as well, or they don't have vehicles to travel out of the area with.
It will be a long road to recovery. Power is out for thousands as far west as Texas. And here in Lake Charles, the hope is that the hurricane season is finally history. The Cajun Navy founder we spoke to says it's going to be a long haul for people here in Lake Charles. They're planning to be here to help for at least the next 6 months. Reporting live in Lake Charles, Louisiana, I'm Caroline Shively, today in Florida.
You know, I think we have a shot at severe weather today across many areas of the Deep South, including Alabama and Georgia, and I'll get to that in a second. But it's all associated with now Tropical Depression Delta. The latest advisory from the Hurricane Center has downgraded it once again now to a depression, which is natural now that it's a couple hundred miles inland. The winds are 35 miles per hour near the center here, and we're getting gusts still of somewhere around 50 miles per hour. So there is still damage potential with some of those stronger winds in and around the center of circulation of Delta, which I mentioned is right about in there. And some of the latest observations do indeed suggest just that. Right now, although Jackson, Mississippi is only gusting to 35, about 2 hours ago, we were getting wind gusts over 50 in many of these locations. So even though it's not raining and the weather may not be as bad generally, we're still getting some pretty bad winds with a lot of reports of trees and power lines down in northeastern Louisiana and parts of western Mississippi right now. So it continues to do damage in spots. Farther to the southeast, we have another threat here associated with wind, but not the core of what's left of Delta. This is a line of showers with gusty winds in it that's got a potential for spinning up a couple of tornadoes. Right now, we don't have any warnings in place, but we got a watch out, which suggests that the conditions are favorable for the potential of tornadoes there in southern Alabama and western Florida.
Rain for you across the Tennessee Valley and the Deep South. For Atlanta, here come your storms tonight. The real meat of the storms between 8 and 10 o'clock this evening, and then tomorrow still some lingering showers for you out there, so don't expect a sunny day to come your way tomorrow. All right, so let's look at the severe weather threat happening for us right now. What's left of Delta? Where do we go from here? Let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, with some details on that.
Yeah, Mike, Delta has become a non-tropical low, post-tropical cyclone. It was a depression earlier today. So it's gaining those frontal characteristics, losing a lot of its tropical characteristics, and you see that kind of comma shape to it that's more characteristic of a frontal system. But the Weather Prediction Center is still writing public advisories on it because of the ongoing rainfall and flood threat. And I would say the area that I'm most concerned about here over the next few hours would be in the immediate northeastern quadrant of the system, where we're going to have some persistent heavy rainfall. And then, of course, you could have some local heavy rain along with the severe weather in the area Mike just talked about. So max winds are 30 miles an hour. Some areas could get some gusts to tropical storm force, especially in the heavy downpours. The pressure's come up a lot since landfall, right? 998, and it's moving northeast at 12 miles an hour near not too far from Tupelo, Mississippi, as it moves northeastward through there, and we're going near Nashville and up through into Ohio, West Virginia on Sunday, where the low pressure system will dissipate. But we got a lot of weather to deal with. Now, the good news is that we're not getting too many reports of really strong gusts, but if you measure gusts 25 miles an hour at the individual spots, in between observation sites, we could be getting gusts to 30, 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. So gusts to tropical storm force. But the main problem, in addition to the severe weather threat, is going to be the local heavy rain that could cause some flash flooding overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. It's northern Mississippi and Alabama, southwestern third of Tennessee. And then when we get into the Appalachians, we're going to have a terrain-induced problem. And that's on top of all the rain that has fallen. This is the corridor where it's really been rough. Pensacola has gotten some in that band leading into the severe weather. But right now, we don't have any flash flood warnings or flood advisories. But again, this corridor, Mike, up northeastern Mississippi into western Tennessee is going to be where the flash flooding could occur. And I'll get more concerned about that even so when after dark, when always trouble finding out how high the water is above the roads.
All right, Dr. Knapp, thanks for that. Of course, we are getting some more images in illustrating what Delta did as it roared ashore in southwestern Louisiana. In a town like Abbeville, the canopy on this gas station ripped off and flattened down to the ground. Really an example of what the winds were doing. We had wind gusts as high as 100 miles per hour with Delta. That actually happened on the west side over in Texas. Now, in Pecan Island here in Louisiana, debris not only litters the side of the road, in some cases, it covers the road here. Look at all this that was washed in. Really amazing stuff. Just nothing but mud. And now you got to get in the shovels, the big front end loaders, and get that stuff all cleared away. What a task! And then In parts of Lake Charles, standing water, stalled out cars in some instances as well, but the flooding that overtook there, and a lot of neighborhoods that took on water once again. We had incredible amounts of rain, northwards of 9 inches of rain in some spots, and the boats pulled out as well.
More than 600,000 people remain without power across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas in the wake of Hurricane Delta. The storm roared ashore last night. It has since been downgraded, but it's still dangerous. CBS News' Mireya Villarreal is in hard-hit Lake Charles, Louisiana.
For the second time in 2 months, Lake Charles is picking up the pieces after another massive storm. Hurricane Delta made landfall Friday as a Cat 2, taking almost the same path as Hurricane Laura just 6 weeks ago.
The wind is relentless right now, hitting about 70 miles per hour.
On Saturday, volunteers with the Cajun Navy cleared debris so people could return to their homes.
The tens of thousands of Louisianans, as we speak, are in a very difficult situation, and we're going to do everything we can, working with our federal and local partners, to make sure that we're addressing their needs.
But in Lake Charles, where so many homes had already been damaged by Hurricane Laura, residents like Russell Wright are finding it hard to stay positive.
And last night, in the middle of the night, when this was going on, water was almost up to the door, and it was, you know, once again, here we go, and you got to rebuild again.
Wright had just started repairing the damage Laura left on his home. Overnight, Delta blew off his protective blue tarp, drenching everything inside, sending him back on his roof Saturday to start all over again.
The pain of losing everything and being without and everything else that's going on, and then this again. It's bad.
Almost every homeowner on this block is just like Russell Wright, working with the insurance companies on repairs after Laura. But after Hurricane Delta, those adjusters are going to have to come back out again. They'll start a new claim, reassess each one of these homes, and try and figure out if anything is salvageable. Mireya Villarreal, CBS News, Lake Charles, Louisiana.
And CBS 4 meteorologist Dave Warren joins us now. Dave, I know we don't have to worry about Delta. However, we have friends and family in the Midwest. Do they still have to worry?
Yes, Midwest and up through the Mid-Atlantic have had a number of flood watches in effect. There were strong storms with that moisture feeding into the storm there today. That led to some actually tornado warnings across parts of the southeast. But look at the rainfall totals next 3 days, all the way up through the Mid-Atlantic. 3 to almost 3 inches of rain, possibly higher, especially right here in North and South Carolina. Up in the Appalachians, there's flood watches, flash flood watches in effect. As far as what's left in the tropics, that area there continuing to watch tropical wave next 3 to 5 days as it moves through this area toward the Windward Islands. It may see a potential for some development, just a low chance of that. Have not seen any change on the scale, but it's something that we will continue to watch.
Flooding as far as the eye can see here. This is drone video giving us a bird's eye look at the aftermath of Hurricane Delta along Cameron, Louisiana. This is right on the coast here. Fierce winds smashed and tore apart homes once again. Second time in about 6 weeks. And it wasn't just that. We also saw gusty winds topple trees and even knock out power across the state of Louisiana. Here in Jennings, large trees crashed onto roofs of homes, even on top of cars. More than 300,000 customers, and that actually means probably more than 1 million people still without power, without air conditioning on this Sunday morning as recovery efforts continue. And we just talked to the pastor here at this church we're sitting next to, and they're going to have a Sunday service on Facebook Live. So we're going to talk to him shortly here and talk about how this church, and again, church is also a community, how the community's dealing with yet another aftermath of a hurricane. Welcome back to Weekend Recharge. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodrow live in Jennings, Louisiana. We're right along I-10, kind of midway between Lake Charles to our west by about 45 miles and Lafayette to our east by about 40 miles or so, about 3 hours west of New Orleans, kind of give you that southwestern Louisiana kind of location where we're on. Take a look at this street here, blocked off because we had numerous trees down. Yesterday morning, we were on the other side of the street. We had numerous pine trees blocking the road. They cleared that out. They can't quite clear this out because it's not just a tree. It's a power line. It's a down power pole here, and even bringing down this oak tree as well. So pretty certain this is not a live wire, but this is not my expertise. Certainly the experts do this. There's plenty of power crews out here trying to restore power. Power is out in this part of town, most of the town of Jennings without power. Make sure if you are out and about, if you see a stoplight that's not working, that's a four-way stop. Even some of the major roads here, speeds 45 miles per hour, four-way stop when you come to a light that is out. We've seen way too many close calls even over the last couple of days we've been here as well. All right, this town is slowly recovering, but there's a town that got hit pretty hard twice for Delta as well as with Laura. That's Lake Charles, Louisiana, just off to our west. I want to bring in Mayor of Lake Charles, Nick Hunter. And Mayor Hunter, thanks for talking to us again. You've been very busy. I've seen you on local TV stations as well. Let's talk about how your city has fared now and what the cleanup process is. It's almost like you're going through, PTSD, because we just went through this a month and a half ago, and now here comes the hurricane. How are you and the town people there in Lake Charles dealing with this?
Well, what we went through is almost adding insult to injury, and I gotta say, there's a lot of people that are feeling pretty despondent right now because we had made such progress and we had made strides from Laura. There was still so much to do, and we were still such in the thick of recovery from Laura, and then to have Delta come just 6 weeks later was a pretty heavy blow. But look, we're waking up today as we did yesterday, and we're picking up the pieces. We're not sitting on our hands. We are going to help each other here in Lake Charles, and we are hoping and praying that we'll get the kind of national and federal response that we need for these two catastrophes back to back.
And Mayor Hunter, I know you wrote this one out as well, so can you kind of compare or contrast what was like going through Delta versus what was going through with Hurricane Laura?
Sure. Well, it is so true that every storm has its own DNA, and Laura hit Lake Charles a little bit later in the evening, so the sounds were very scary, to be honest. It really sounded like a freight train around the entire house. The entire house was like a freight train. And then with Delta, it came a little bit earlier in the day, so you could see more of what was going on. And that was additionally quite scary to see it. With Delta, we were more concerned about the floodwaters, and we saw the rising waters more than we did with Laura. So they were both relatively scary incidents, but unique in their own aspect.
Well, Mayor Hunter, if you're any representative of the people of Lake Charles, I know you guys are a strong lot and definitely will recover from this as well. Thanks again for your time, and best wishes to you and the men and women there, and everyone in Lake Charles there. That's Mayor Nick Hunter, Mayor of Lake Charles. And Alex, again, we're seeing this time and time again. People, they're hurting, but they're going to get through this once again. Alex?
Absolutely. And we got a lot more to talk about on Weekend Recharge, the Texas State Fair. They go mobile this year due to the pandemic, and Big Tech says y'all come to his drive-through food festival. So what's on the menu? We'll talk about it next.